Arthur mentioned during our engagement that his position at a large corporation was secure enough to provide for the both of us, assuring me there was nothing to fret about. However, this assurance quickly faded once we were married. He changed his tune. Arthur and Jack would hurl insults at me daily. On top of that, he managed the money himself and skimped on living expenses. He'd complain nonstop, even though he let me do the cooking. Fed up, I declared divorce to Arthur and left the house. Later, I bumped into Jack by chance. "Hey, heard you're getting TANF now?" I was surprised. "Huh? You must be mistaking me for someone else." "Don't put on airs," Jack smirked. "Listen, we're estranged, okay? Don't come crying to me about having no money. I won't lend you a dime, remember that." As I opened my mouth to retort, he had already disappeared into the crowd. I lowered my head, feeling the stares of passers-by. My shoulders shaking, I couldn't suppress my laughter. Poor thing, he knows nothing. I can't wait to see his reaction when he learns the truth. I'm Sarah, a 50-year-old housewife. I married Arthur 5 years ago. When we met, Arthur was the picture of a fine young man. We met at a gathering of acquaintances, and I found him fun to talk to and very friendly. As we parted, he said, "I want to meet just the two of us next time." Feeling sad about saying goodbye, I agreed. When we started dating, he mentioned having a son named Jack with his ex-wife, who was then in 5th grade. We dined together a few times. He was a bright and pleasant boy, just like his dad. A year later, on the night Arthur proposed, I took a leap and opened up. "You know, I live with my parents while working part-time, right? The company I joined right after graduating was a black company, and it wrecked my health." "Is that so?" "It was tough to quit too. I think long hours will be difficult for me in the future." Then Arthur smiled kindly. "Don't worry about it, just stay at home. Look, I work at a big company. I can work enough for both of us." Relieved by his words, I accepted his proposal. I was glad to have met a good man and believed we were starting a happy married life. I never imagined tasting despair in less than half a year. As we got used to living as a family of 3, Arthur and Jack's attitudes changed drastically. They started ridiculing my actions and words in a light tone. "Mom, are you bedridden again? Where's my sandwich?" Jack frowned discontentedly as he came into the bedroom before school. I had participated in weeding at a nearby park yesterday and felt ill. It was an unusually hot day, and I had felt unwell since the day before. I had asked Arthur, but he refused with an irritated look. Being a housewife must be nice, slacking off all year. I need my days off, you know. Let me rest, okay? Unable to get up the next morning due to pushing myself, I apologized to Jack. "Sorry, Jack, I couldn't prepare your sandwich, so buy one at the grocery store," handing him money. Jack grumbled, "Mom, can't you at least make a sandwich? You always take shortcuts with frozen food or leftovers. You're failing as a mom if you can't even cook." His words stung. "Don't blame Mom, Jack." Arthur joined in with a half smile as he passed the hallway. "Since you skimped on the sandwich, tonight's dinner must be lavish." "Oh, is that so? Then I'll look forward to it. Being a housewife, you should have plenty of time for dinner, right? You're not sleeping until the evening, are you? Make sure to clean thoroughly without slacking." The two of them nonchalantly laughed at my poor condition, dropping their insensitive lines before leaving, as if I could prepare a lavish meal lying in bed and staring at the ceiling. I let out a heavy sigh. I apologized to Jack. "Sorry, Jack, I couldn't prepare your sandwich, so please buy one at the grocery store," as I handed him money. Jack crumbled. Mom, can't you at least make a sandwich? You always take shortcuts with frozen food or leftovers. You're failing as a mom if you can't even cook. His words stung. Don't blame Mom, Jack, Arthur joined in with a half smile as he passed the hallway. Since you skimped on the sandwich, tonight's dinner must be lavish. Oh, is that so? Then I'll look forward to it. Being a housewife, you should have plenty of time for dinner, right? You're not sleeping until the evening, are you? Make sure to clean thoroughly without slacking. The two of them nonchalantly laughed at my poor condition, dropping their insensitive lines before leaving, as if I could prepare a lavish meal lying in bed and staring at the ceiling. I let out a heavy sigh. Because Arthur is an extreme penny pincher, despite being a section chief at a big company and earning a high salary, the living expenses he gave me were ridiculously low. It's my salary, so why should my wife manage it? After we married, Arthur insisted on this, and I, not opposing meekly, followed. I believed it didn't matter who managed the finances, as long as it was done properly. Then, Arthur got carried away and started spending money as he pleased. It's necessary for work, drinking expenses are business expenses, it's essential. Using such reasons as an excuse, he would buy expensive clothes and watches for himself but make a sour face even when I bought cheap snacks. Since he insisted that a housewife doesn't need an allowance, I had to report to Arthur and get permission to spend money whenever I went to the hair salon or bought clothes. One pair of jeans is enough, isn't it? You're buying more? I want a warm pair for winter. Fine, buy them at a cheap store. I also want to get a haircut. Can I go to the hair salon once every 2 months to maintain my hairstyle? What's the point of you trying to be fashionable? If you keep your hair long, you only need to cut it once every 6 months. I won't allow haircuts. That's why I'm only allowed to buy cheap makeup from drugstores. I want to switch to something better because it's rough on my skin, but he won't listen. Moreover, the living expenses he gives are a third of the average. Within this budget, our nutrition will be unbalanced, I lamented, to which Arthur responded with a raised chin. On the TV saving show, they managed to live on this amount. They had a farmer-in-law providing vegetables and bread. It's impossible with these high prices. That's your job to manage. I was distressed by the thriftiness and living expenses, but what I couldn't stomach was about the wreath for Dad's funeral. When Dad, who had been ill, passed away and it was time to send a wreath, Arthur visibly grimaced. We don't need to send a wreath for the funeral, right? Anyone attending the funeral other than the chief mourner should send one. Really? Then use your savings, it's none of my business. He said this to me as I prepared for the funeral with tears in my eyes. His utter lack of concern infuriated me. I never planned to ask you for it, so don't worry. Good, but do Jack and I really have to go? Our long weekend will be ruined, and I hate that, right, Dad? I had plans to play a new game. Although they grumbled, I never doubted they would come. However, Arthur and Jack arrived late, barely greeting my mom and relatives, and left swiftly. My exhausted mom didn't seem to have the energy to blame them, but my relatives were furious. What's the meaning of this, Arthur? Your wife's father died, and you're too cold. Jack, you've received so many gifts and allowances from Sarah's dad. While I apologized to my relatives, I felt my love for the two of them rapidly cooling. Arthur, always in stylish suits with a refreshing aura, and Jack, attending a prestigious university, well regarded as a handsome father and son in the neighborhood, only hurled insults at me at home. They wouldn't come straight home after work or school, wandering around and returning with lipstick and perfume scents. Despite doing as they pleased, they treated me like a housekeeper, demanding lavish meals with a meager food budget. Lately, when I served dishes with chicken or pork, both would glare at me with disdain and hurl insults. Don't you want to serve your husband good food after he returns from work? If I get sick from eating this poor food, how will you take responsibility? Are you even a mom? I can make delicious meals even with chicken or pork. Besides, disliking vegetables and fish, you'll get sick with such a picky diet. I'm saying I'd eat if it were high quality. Don't complain when you can't satisfy us. I don't need advice from someone as frail as you. They used to eat while complaining, but lately, they just leave the food untouched. Yet, if I don't cook, are you slacking off even though you're a wife? They would yell. I eat the leftovers for breakfast or lunch the next day, but tears well up, wondering for whom I'm cooking. As for their meals, they subsist on store-bought sandwiches, instant ramen, and snack foods. Eventually, Arthur was diagnosed as pre-diabetic in a company health check, and Jack started gaining weight. It was an inevitable outcome. Then they lashed out at me. What kind of wife makes her husband and child sick? We don't need a useless person like you. We're getting a divorce. Then I'll leave. They were surprised when I agreed easily. Are you sure you're unemployed? You've been living off me. How will you survive now? Don't worry about me. I'll send the divorce papers for you to sign later. Please leave my stuff until the movers come to pick it up. Nobody's going to take your stuff, Arthur sneered. You'll definitely regret divorcing a high-earning, handsome guy like me. A kind husband who let you be a housewife with 3 meals and naps. There's no one else like that in the world. Right, that's right. You've been living in luxury on Dad's money till now. You'll struggle from here on. While I packed clothes into my suitcase, Arthur and Jack kept talking endlessly behind me. Honestly, I envy Arthur's ability to overestimate himself so much. When we were dating, I saw this part of him as confident and shining. You'll just go back to your parents, right? Say hi to your pensioner mom for me. You two will be heading straight to poverty, Jack, I bet. They'll end up on TANF soon, Jack laughed at Arthur's prediction. They already reek of poverty, but with Grandma, it'll be the ultimate. The funeral the other day was nothing special, it smelled like poverty. I thought so too, like a poor family's funeral. I want a lavish one, Jack got it, Dad. But for Dad, who works at a big company, and me attending a prestigious university, poverty is a different world. Their endless comments infuriated me, but realizing it was pointless to respond, I let it all go. After returning home and explaining everything to Mom, she lowered her voice. At the funeral, seeing Arthur and Jack, I felt something wasn't right, but I thought it's not good to interfere too much in my daughter's household, and kept silent. I was too preoccupied with Dad's care. I'm sorry for barging in like this. It's okay, I've been lonely without you. Why don't you stay here? Thanks, but once I get my job on track, I plan to move to an apartment. Mom's concern was comforting, but living with her might make me too dependent. Living nearby and visiting occasionally would be the right balance. Yes, Arthur and Jack mocked me as unemployed, but in fact, I've been working from home. It all started with the budget recipes I posted on my blog. After receiving many positive comments, I boldly launched a cooking site and shared my recipes, which quickly gained readers and internet fame. Soon after, an editor from a major publisher approached me, and now I'm gradually preparing to publish a cookbook. Thanks to this, I had no time to dwell on the divorce, and days flew by. One day, my phone rang insistently. I paused, stirring the ingredients in the pan, and answered the phone. Hello? Hey, what's this about a closet for the divorce trial? I sighed, knowing it was about that. You and Jack hurled endless abuse at me. Oh, I thought, never mind, relief in his voice. Arthur continued, I didn't cheat or anything, you know. What did you record me and Jack? Your memory alone won't cut it. I've noted everything in my diary. Try and claim it if you can. Really? Poor people and their obsession with money. You reek of frugality if you think you can get a deposit for the divorce trial. Go ahead. After his outburst, Arthur hung up. I finished cooking and visited a detective agency, requesting an investigation into Arthur's background. Soon, his affair with a subordinate was uncovered. The day after sending the two-shot photos and investigation report to his company, Arthur contacted me again. You spreading this at work is low. The angry manager reported it to the higher-ups, and now I'm fired. Oh, she was the manager's daughter, wasn't she? It's your fault for cheating, knowing they're strict about such matters, I continued, laughing. But you shouldn't have any trouble, right? With all the saving you did, you must have plenty of savings. Aren't you and Jack living luxuriously? Jack moved into a dormitory this spring because commuting was tough. Damn, I have prepaid dorm fees and apartment loans. My savings drained by that woman, she was two-timing me with a younger guy. Sounds tough for you, but it's none of my concern. Oh, and about the divorce trial deposit, I'll also take half the value of the apartment for distribution of property. When the invoice arrives, please transfer the full amount to my account. Arthur was yelling on the other side, but I hung up without a care. One day, while returning from shopping in town, I bumped into Jack. Dressed in his usual flashy fashion, with piercings all over his face and his attention-grabbing hairstyle, he was easy to spot from a distance. Seeing me, Jack raised his hand in greeting. Hey, heard you're getting TANF now? I looked puzzled. Huh? Who are you mistaking me for? Don't put on airs, Jack said, smirking. It's obvious where an unemployed old lady like you would end up if you had just obediently followed me and Dad. You'd still be living a comfortable life. It's pathetic, really. Angry, I couldn't help but retort. Receiving TANF is a citizen's right. Any one of us could need it someday due to illness or an accident. It's wrong to look down on that. Yeah. So you're saying you're receiving it too? Jack said, dismissing me with a smirk and pointing his finger at me. Listen, you and I are estranged. Don't come crying to me for money, remember that. As I opened my mouth to reply, he turned his back and disappeared into the crowd. I lowered my head, conscious of the stares of passers-by, shaking my shoulders. I couldn't help but laugh, it was just too ridiculous. Poor thing, he knows nothing. I can't wait to see his reaction when he finds out the truth. A few days later, I woke up and checked my phone to find an unbelievable number of missed calls from Jack. Reluctantly, I called back, and Jack shouted at me furiously. You deceive me, old woman. What are you talking about? I heard from a cousin you got 3 high-rise apartments from Grandpa's inheritance and are living a carefree life. Hiding that and getting a divorce is cowardly. That's my personal asset. Why should I have to tell you or Arthur? It's joint property. You should have done a distribution of property with Dad during the divorce. Unfortunately, it became mine after the divorce procedures, so I can't give it to Arthur officially. I knew from Dad's will that it would be mine, but I delayed the procedures until after the divorce because I didn't want to share it with Arthur. Then Jack shouted in frustration. A rich woman like you getting TANF, and I'll report you to the authorities right now. Feel free. It's not me, but Arthur who's receiving it. Jack fell silent. What I told you last time, it's not me. I explained, as if speaking to a child. Honestly, even without the inheritance, I can live well. I have income from the cooking site and book sales I started in secret. But Arthur, after spending all his money on his affair, had lots of payments piling up and was borrowing heavily. When his affair was discovered and he was fired, his income stopped. Are you listening? Dad's on TANF, and no way. I pulled the phone away from my ear as Jack screamed, waiting for him to calm down. I continued, you really didn't know anything. He's too proud to tell his son. According to relatives he begged money from, he's behind on his apartment rent, facing eviction, and now stays at home all day in an old apartment. If you're worried, why don't you contact him? There was silence on the other side for a while, then Jack said resentfully, you're cold-hearted, after all Dad did for you. You have no intention of repaying the favor. If you have money, you should give some to Dad. Why should I? Ever since our marriage, it's been nothing but unpleasant memories. I don't feel indebted, I stated coldly. If you're so concerned, why don't you, his son, lend him money? You're working part-time, after all. I don't have savings. The part-time pay goes to, hanging out with friends and stuff. Jack suddenly became evasive, and I smirked. You've been living quite lavishly for a student. Blowing money to hang out at clubs is not a good idea. How do you know that? The other day in town, I saw you from across the street. After we parted, you met up with a girl at a club and entered a brand store, arm in arm. Also, a club membership card was left at the house, and using my credit card for shopping without my permission is out of the question. Jack stammered in response, that's unfair. You got high-rise apartments from Grandpa. Why don't I or Dad get a share? This is discrimination. Yeah. The credit card bill will be sent soon. Make sure you pay it. Before I could finish, the call was disconnected. Sighing, I ended the call too. Just when I thought it was all over, a few months later, Arthur and Jack showed up at my parents' house without any notice. The doorbell rang incessantly, and when I answered, it was the two of them, expecting they came to borrow money. I let them into the house to avoid causing a disturbance in the neighborhood. Arthur and Jack, who until recently were so stylish, now appeared drastically changed, wearing wrinkled shirts and dirty trousers. Their eyes were lifeless and gaunt, but they still had the energy to be sarcastic. Entering the living room, Arthur looked around and sneered with a half-smile, same old house, huh? Why not sell one of those high-rise apartments and rebuild this place? Do something nice for Mom, living miserably on her pension. This is Dad's house, and we like it this way. More importantly, when are you two planning to pay me back? You're past the deadline. Kevin lifted his chin arrogantly and said, Sarah, I'll forgive you now, so let's remarry. You started a cooking site, right? If you manage the household perfectly, I'll even let you work. So, come back. Such a generous dad, forgiving the wife who abandoned her husband and child. So, Mom, why not live with Dad again? Living with just two women must be insecure. Stunned, I was speechless. After a moment, intense anger welled up inside me. Don't joke with me. How much more do you plan to ridicule and fool me? Furious, I yelled at the astonished Arthur and Jack. After treating me like nothing more than a housewife, hurling abuse, not providing proper living expenses, and then driving me out, now you want me back just because you found out I inherited high-rise apartments? No way. What, you're going to abandon us? Rich people really are stingy, knowing we're struggling with money and still demanding payment. You're heartless. You were poor yourself until recently, don't get cocky. In the midst of the argument, Mom returned from shopping. Arthur and Jack immediately started buttering her up. Please lend us some money. We'll probably pay it back. Besides, isn't it unfair that only Sarah gets Grandpa's inheritance? Give me one of the high-rise apartments too. Hi, Grandma, long time no see. How have you been? Grandma, please persuade Mom to remarry Dad. He doesn't want to break up, but Mom is being stubborn. Mom, surprised at first, changed her expression upon hearing their lines. She placed her echo bag on the fridge's floor and let out a deep sigh. So shameless, both of you. What? I'm telling you to have some shame. Startled by Mom's sudden loud voice, Arthur and Jack were understandably confused. Mom usually calmly scolded them. I've heard everything about the divorce from Sarah. I can't believe you have the nerve to show up here. No, Sarah's exaggerating. You have to listen to our side too. That's right, Grandma. Mom is quite the liar. I remember how well you two behaved at my husband's funeral. Mom cut off Jack's words and continued sternly, arriving nonchalantly late to the funeral, not greeting me or the relatives, yawning through the service, and leaving before the coffin was sent off. And now you dare ask for his inheritance? Go back to sleep. She drove a taken aback Arthur and Jack to the front door and glared at them one last time. You two are now strangers to us. Don't come here again. If you do, I'll call the police. Mom threw their shoes out the door, forcing them to leave in their socks, and immediately locked the front door. Arthur, who had been avoiding paying me, was advised by his lawyer that a lawsuit would cost even more. Reluctantly, he finally transferred the money to my account. Even though Arthur was fired from his job, he couldn't find another one. The in-laws, hearing about their son's situation from relatives, stepped in to cover his debts. They visited my parents' house and apologized profusely for Arthur's troubles. Later, Arthur, having given up on finding a new job, returned to the countryside under the guise of helping with the family's farming. However, the story of our divorce spread through the village, leading to both children and elders pointing and laughing at Arthur. There's thrifty Uncle Arthur. Even with the degree from a good university and a job at a big company, what's the use if your wife leaves you for being too arrogant? The reason for his divorce from his first wife was also his reckless spending. He'll never change. Being mocked by the villagers is embarrassing. Remarry me to show them. I kept receiving such persistent messages from Arthur, so I deleted his contact. His mistress, apparently no longer interested after the money ran out, had long since left him. I found her with the detective's help and made sure she paid the divorce trial's security deposit. I also made Jack reimburse for the card he used without permission. Though enrolled in a prestigious university and on track to become an elite like his father, Jack started skipping classes and playing around, leading to failing grades and eventual expulsion. His friends and girlfriends were concerned, but Jack, in his arrogance, alienated them with his prideful remarks. He then had a major argument with Arthur, saying, "You're my son, yet you won't help repay the debt." Now, they're estranged. Jack lives alone in a small apartment, making ends meet with part-time jobs. Gone are the days of buying whatever he wanted and enduring sarcastic remarks despite high earnings. For me, it's a refreshing change. With my cooking site taking off and a book deal finalized, I moved to the top floor of the high-rise apartment inherited from Dad. Mom is still healthy at 73. The high-rise is close to our family home, so it's convenient if anything happens to her. I'm planning a surprise hot spring trip for Mom's upcoming birthday. Though my marriage was a failure, I want to continue having a good relationship with Mom.
Growing up, I always felt like life was steady and predictable. I had my routines, my home, and the things that made me feel secure. I valued that predictability until one night when my world changed in an unexpected way. It wasn't anything major, just a small disruption, but it marked the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything I thought I knew about myself. It started with a simple sound. The clattering of a trash bin knocked over in the middle of the night startled me awake. I was already annoyed this had happened before. I figured it was the stray dogs again, but little did I know that this minor disturbance would lead me to meet two people who would disrupt my quiet life in unimaginable ways. I groggily made my way to the back door, club in hand, irritated by the all-too-familiar mess outside. For the third time that week, I'd been woken up by the sound of trash cans being knocked over. I was fed up with cleaning up someone else's problem. Why couldn't people keep their pets under control? While I understood the animals were probably hungry, it didn't ease my frustration. I cautiously opened the gate, ready to deal with the nuisance. As I neared the overturned garbage, I saw two shadowy figures standing by the mess, and my grip on the club tightened as they noticed me. "Please, sir, we're just hungry," one of them said. "We'll clean everything up. Don't hurt us." These weren't dogs. They were children. But they certainly seemed wild. It was dark, so I grabbed them by their collars and dragged them into the backyard under the security lights. I picked them up to get a better look. They were scruffy and dirty, dressed in oversized, ragged clothes and baseball caps. It was cold out, and I saw them shivering. "Did you two knock over my trash earlier this week?" I asked. They exchanged glances. "Yeah, you always throw out something like pizza or food," one of them replied. "I'm sorry we did this. We won't do it again. Just let us go. We'll clean everything up." "This won't do." I gripped their shirts tightly and led them inside. I brought them straight to the bathroom, pushed them in, and shut the door. "Don't come out until I'm back," I said. I went and grabbed some of my ex-wife's sweatpants, sweatshirts, clean socks, and big fluffy towels. When I returned, they had tried to open the window to escape. "You might like being dirty," I said, "but I doubt a hot shower will hurt you. There's soap and shampoo here. These are clean clothes and towels. Get undressed and get in the shower." "We don't like being dirty," the larger one growled. "We just don't have a shower as nice as yours." "Are you going to stand there the whole time? You probably think we'll steal something," I said. "Yeah, right," the kid snapped. "We're not going to steal your toilet paper. We're not thieves. What, are you some kind of creep, you into little girls?" I was shocked. Now that I looked closer, beneath all that dirt, they were definitely girls. I didn't realize you were girls. Just clean yourselves up and I'll get you something to eat. Come to the kitchen when you're done." I left them in the bathroom and headed to the kitchen. I opened the fridge and took stock. There was cold fried chicken, half a bowl of potato salad, a tray of veggies, some sandwich pastrami, and dill pickles. I split the chicken between two plates, 3 pieces each, and added a big scoop of potato salad. I put some veggies on a plate with dip, threw a few pickles on the side, and made pastrami sandwiches for each of them. I even added some chips for good measure. Hopefully, they'd like the Munster cheese, mayo, and mustard on their sandwiches. I heard the bathroom door creak open, followed by hushed whispers outside the kitchen. A minute later, 2 of the most beautiful girls I'd ever seen stepped into the room. They had long, jet-black hair, olive skin, and the brightest green, almond-shaped eyes I'd ever seen, along with high cheekbones and the cutest little noses. They looked like they were still in their early teens, maybe around 11 or 12. It was amusing to see them in Brianna's clothes. She's tall, and they were tiny, with their sleeves and pant legs rolled up, looking a bit like tramps. "Have a seat," I said, offering them a chair. "Do you want Coca-Cola, or I have juice or milk?" They both asked for milk. "My name is McKay North," I said as I poured the milk and placed it in front of them. "What are your names?" "My name's Maggie," said the older one, "short for Margaret. This is Stokely." "Can we really eat all this?" she asked. "You can have more if you want sandwiches," I replied. "But I'm not cooking at 2 a.m. I'll make something in the morning." "No, this is great, thank you," Stokely said, while Maggie eyed me warily. "What do you want from us? We don't do any dirty stuff," Maggie said suspiciously. I laughed. "Neither do I. If either of you had designs on my virtue, you'd be disappointed." They didn't seem to get my humor. "I'm not into little girls," I added. They didn't like being called little girls, but they started eating, and fast, like wolves. "Hey, slow down," I told them. "The chickens aren't going anywhere. They're dead, and the potatoes were never fast. You'll hurt your stomach." This made them giggle, and they started eating more slowly. "Where do you two live?" I asked. "There's an empty house at the end of the block," Maggie answered. "We found a mattress and some blankets, but we're afraid pill dependents might move in." Once they know it's empty, they will, "How about sleeping in a warm, clean bed tonight?" I offered. They looked at me suspiciously again. "Not mine," I laughed. "I have 3 extra bedrooms. Well, they're mine too, but you know what I mean." They laughed nervously. "We don't have any money," Stokely said. "We can't pay you. We just collect cans, but we spend all our money on food." "I'm not asking for money," I said. "Did I say anything about you paying me?" "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Why are you so kind to us, Mac?" "Call me Mac," I said. Everyone does. "Why are you being so nice, Mac?" Maggie pressed. "I'm not trying to be cute," I told her. "I'm a good guy. Just ask my mom." This brought smiles to their faces, and I liked it. I made a mental note to get them to smile more often. "If I were in your shoes, I'd want someone to be kind to me," I said. They seemed to be thinking it over. "Can I have some of these chips?" Stokely asked. I pushed the bag toward them, and they both reached in while continuing to eat their sandwiches. I finished my own and noticed they were still hungry, so I poured them more milk. They drank it all and cleaned their plates, even the vegetables. They must have been starving. "Go to bed," I told them. "Each of you has your own bathroom. There are toothbrushes, combs, and other things like that. Aspirin, stomach medicine, toothpaste, and dental floss are in the first aid kits. If you need anything else, just ask." "Can we lock the doors?" Maggie asked. "Yes, but if I knock, you have to open them within a reasonable time," I said. They exchanged a glance. Then Maggie's green eyes lit up. "He thinks we'll steal something," she told Stokely. "Don't worry, Mac, we won't take anything. It's okay if you don't trust us. We don't really trust you either." I had to laugh. "Fair enough. We have mutual distrust. But you'll soon learn you can trust me. I almost never hurt beautiful girls." This brought another set of dazzling smiles. They followed me down the hallway to their rooms. I heard the locks click and smiled to myself. As I returned to bed, I lay awake for a while wondering what had happened to these girls. Why were they digging through my trash? Why were they alone? Where was their family? I planned to get some answers in the morning. I was getting dressed when I heard the floorboards creaking in the hall. I cracked the door open and saw them sneaking toward the living room. I figured they were about to leave, so I stepped out. They froze. "Girls, are you ready for breakfast?" I asked. They looked at each other. "Maybe we should just leave," Maggie said. "You're not going to lock us up or anything, are you?" "You mean make you stay?" I asked. They glanced at each other again and nodded. "No, I won't force you to stay," I said. "That's not how I do things. But I'd love for you to have breakfast with me." They looked at each other once more. "Will you let us go after?" Stokely asked. "If that's what you want," I said. "Though I was hoping you'd spend the day with me. But if you have somewhere else to be, that's okay." "Yeah, we've got to meet our stockbroker," Maggie quipped, her face lighting up like a Christmas tree. "So, what's for breakfast?" "No, what are you going to feed us?" She corrected herself. "Are you an English teacher or something?" "Actually, yes," I said. "I teach English literature at the university." "Cool," Stokely said. "We don't go to school. Too busy." "But you're having breakfast, right? I was thinking waffles and bacon. Sound good?" It did. So we headed to the kitchen. They got out the waffle iron while I mixed the batter, and they made waffles while I fried 2 pounds of bacon. I'm kind of a syrup snob. I'm a coffee snob, too. I let Maggie turn the bacon while I ground the coffee beans. Everything came together nicely, and we had real maple syrup and waffles. They horrified me by asking for coffee creamer, but I kept some around for the Barbarians and Brianna, and they loved the vanilla flavor. We ate all the bacon, and they each had 3 waffles. "Stick with me, girls, and in a week you'll be as fat as toads," I joked. They laughed, and it was the best sound I'd ever heard. Then they gulped down milk like hungry calves. My pantry was definitely going to need restocking. "So, tell me about Maggie and Stokely," I asked. "What's going on with you two? Why are you digging through people's trash for food?" We took our coffee into the living room, and they shared their sad story. Their father had been a car mechanic. He lost his job when they were young, which led him to start drinking and abusing them. Their mother eventually divorced him, and they never saw him again. The economy in Detroit was falling apart, making it hard to find work. Their mom drove a taxi to support them, but one night she picked up the wrong passenger. He stabbed her for the little money she had and left her to bleed to end of life. The girls were put into foster care, but the foster homeowner began maltreating them. They ran away and lived on the streets for 3 months. Their last name was Steele, and they constantly worried about freezing to end of life, being maltreated or eliminated, and where their next meal would come from. I sat quietly after they finished their story. My heart broke for them. I wondered how many more kids like them were out there, living the same story. This was probably more common than I had ever realized. I wondered if they'd let me help them, and how I even could. It seemed unlikely that Children's Services would let them stay with me. A single man housing 2 young girls? It sounded like something a carnivore would dream up, and I doubted social services would allow it. They interrupted my thoughts. "Mac, are you married?" Stokely asked. "I was," I replied, "but my ex thought I wasn't ambitious enough. She's a hotshot lawyer and has been all over. There was no room for marriage in her life." "What a witch," Maggie commented. I laughed. "She's actually a really good person. She didn't cheat or anything, and we're still close friends. We both agreed we should never have gotten married. We were too young and too dumb." "How old are you?" Stokely asked. "I'm 28, I told her. "How old are you?" "I'm 11, and she's 13, Stokely answered. "What are you doing today?" I asked. "What are we doing today?" She corrected herself. "Yes, what you said." "We're going to talk," I said, "and I'll introduce you to someone." I opened the garage door, and suddenly a mass of fur came bounding in. He spotted our guests and leaped onto the sofa, settling on their laps and licking them with his big pink tongue. "This is Granville," I said, "but I call him Grandma." The girls burst into giggles as the dog covered them with licks. At 130 pounds, they could barely move him. "Lie down, Grandma," I commanded, and he reluctantly settled on their legs. "He's huge," Stokely laughed, stroking his head. "What kind of dog is this? He's striped like a tiger." "He's a bull mastiff," I explained. "That's why he has that brindle color." "He looks like he could bite our faces off," Maggie said. "Yes, he could, but he won't. He's gentle with my friends. He sees you here being kind, so he loves you. If you were threatening, he'd get aggressive. Now that he knows you, he won't let anyone be mean to you. If I yell at you, he won't like it. He protects the people he cares about." Stokely slid down and wrapped her arms around the dog's neck as he licked her hand. "I love him," she said. "He's so wrinkly and cute." "Does he live in the garage?" she asked. "No, he lives in the house," I replied. "He got sick yesterday, so I put him outside to avoid a mess." "What made him sick?" Stokely asked. "He eats things he shouldn't, sticks, bugs, dead stuff." "You name it. He seems fine now, though." "Gross," Maggie said. "He licked my face." "Yeah, he's a bit disgusting, but he's my buddy. He'll be your buddy too if you let him. We should take him for a walk." I grabbed his leash, and Maggie wanted to lead him. But really the dog led her, dragging her a few yards ahead of Stokely and me. Stokely slipped her small hand into mine, and I looked down at her. She smiled up at me. She was so beautiful. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Of course, sweetheart," I said. "I like holding hands with pretty girls." She blushed a little, but didn't let go. We walked for a couple of miles, and by the time we got back, Granville was panting and drooling. It was cold out, but he didn't seem to care. We drank more coffee and talked for the rest of the day. Eventually, I asked them if they'd let me help them. "What can you do?" Maggie asked. "I'm not sure," I admitted, "but I could talk to Brianna. She's a lawyer, though a different kind. Maybe she'll have some ideas." "Is this the same witch?" Maggie asked. "Maggie, stop calling her that. She's not a witch. Do you trust me?" I asked. They exchanged looks and nodded. "Yeah, I guess," Stokely said. "You've been really kind to us." "Okay, let's call her and see if she can come over. I think you'll like her. Just give her a chance." Brianna was busy, but agreed to come over for dinner. Bri is a tall, stunning redhead, and even though she doesn't realize it, she's incredibly sexy. When she walked in, I could tell the girls were impressed. She kissed me until my toes curled, then hugged both girls. "You've replaced me?" she teased, winking at them. "No, Bri, you're irreplaceable," I joked. She beamed, clearly pleased. I explained to the girls that Bri and I were still good friends, and we were. We had a friends with benefits kind of relationship. We still had great sex, sometimes once a week, sometimes more. Occasionally, she'd stay with me for a week, and we'd have sex like rabbits. But she didn't have time for a husband, and I doubted she ever would. We loved each other, but we couldn't make marriage work. As friends, we were great, but as a married couple, we fought constantly. "So, who are your new girlfriends?" she asked, smiling at them. I saw they were dazzled. "I'm Maggie, and this is Stokely." "Nice to meet you," Bri said. "You know this guy's dangerous, right?" "Not to us," Stokely said. "But he could be to someone who's his enemy. He has a club, and a very big dog." Bree nudged Granville with her boot, and he grumbled in his sleep. "Hey, big guy." She knelt down and hugged him. "Miss me?" He rolled his eyes but didn't have the energy to lift his head. "What's going on, Mac?" she asked. "What did you need to talk about? Not that I mind coming over for dinner. He's a great cook, girls, if you can get him motivated." "I think he made lamb chops," Maggie said. "We've never had anything like this before." "Well, sounds like I'm in for a treat, but seriously, what's the big deal?" she asked again. "During dinner," I explained. "We need your help, Bree," I said. "We don't know anything about legal stuff. The girls are orphans. Their dad might be alive, but no one knows where he is. He abandoned them and their mom was eliminated. They ended up in foster care where some creep started maltreating them. They ran away and have been living on the streets. I found them digging through my trash, and now we're trying to figure out how to keep them from going back to that life." She looked at me for a moment. "You want them, don't you?" she said, exhaling. "Jesus, Mac, you've always wanted kids. And because I didn't give you any, you want them, don't you?" I blushed. "Yeah, I kind of do. What do you think, Bree? What's the best way to handle this?" "I don't think it's possible," she said. "No family court is going to give you 2 young girls. You're a single guy. It's a disaster waiting to happen. They won't allow it." I looked at the girls, and their wide eyes were on me. "What?" I asked. They exchanged glances and suddenly burst into tears, running up to hug me. "You wanted to keep us?" Stokely sobbed. "I can't believe it. I never thought we'd find anyone. Anyone." She couldn't finish through the tears. I held them tight. "Yes, girls, I did think about it. You need someone to look after you, and I need someone to look after me. I thought we could figure this out together." Their small bodies trembled as they clung to me. I looked at Bree, helpless, as tears streamed down her face. She glanced from the girls to me. "Damn it, Mac. Look what you've done to me. Just when I think I've got you figured out, you surprise me. What am I going to do with you?" She had a strange expression, like she was seeing me in a new light. "Give me a few days to think. Girls, you're coming with me. You can't stay here with Mac. It'll ruin everything if anyone finds out. Mac, we're taking Grandma too. I can't stay home without him, and you'll have to look after the girls." She whisked them and the dog out the door like a whirlwind and into her Mercedes. "I'll call you," she said. Over the next 2 weeks, she called me for about 30 seconds 3 times, but I didn't see her or the girls. Then on a Friday morning, she called and asked to meet for dinner at Alfonso's, a little Italian place in Pontiac that we frequented. When I arrived, she was already at the bar, with guys hovering around her. The moment she saw me, she jumped up, leaving them in the dust. We walked to our usual booth, but this time she sat next to me instead of across the table, which was unusual. We ordered, and she stayed quiet for a bit. Finally, she said, "You know I love you, right, Mac?" "Yes, and I love you too," I replied. "I'm not talking about loving your mom or anything like that. I'm in love with you, Mac. I always have been, ever since that day at Cedar Point. You're the only man I've ever loved or will ever love," she said. "I trust you completely. I love everything about you, except the part where we were married. You know I need to be free. No commitments, no baggage, no ties. I love my job and my life, but I don't love them more than I love you, and I don't have to choose. You're as faithful as Grandma. We've got an understanding. I don't sleep with anyone but you, never have. You always got that about me, which is why what I'm about to say is going to sound crazy." "Ooh," I joked. "Sounds like I'm in for a shock." She gave me a look. "Yes, you are. Will you marry me, Mac?" I nearly choked on my wine. Getting wine in your lungs is not ideal. Once I recovered, I just sat there stunned, my mouth open. "Stop being an idiot and answer me," she barked. "Hell no," I finally managed. "Why, Bree, we make each other miserable. In a month, we'll be at each other's throats. What's wrong with how things are now?" "Nothing," she admitted. "This isn't about us. It's about the sweetest, most adorable girls on the planet. Mac, I'm completely in love with them. You wrecked my life by inviting me over that night. They're desperate to see you. Every night, they beg and cry to come see you. But I'm not giving them up. I've never been happier than I am with them, and no judge would give us custody. Not to me, not to you, not to either of us alone. But if we were married, they'd give them to us in a heartbeat. So I need them. And if I need them, I need you. If you want them, you'll have to deal with me too. Can we do this, Mac?" "I doubt it," I told her. "You're as bad as me. You come home drunk, you're never on time for anything except work, and half the time you don't come home at all. Bree, We've been through this. I know, but what if things are different now? I can't wait to come home to them. I always call when I'm running late, and since they've been with me, I only have one glass of wine a night. I didn't know I could feel this way. Marry me, Mac. Give me a chance. We should talk this over, I said. Then talk. What are we doing here? You think I'm joking around? Tell me what's going on. Should I start? I signaled the waiter for more wine. Go ahead. What drives me crazy about you is your need to control me, she said. You have to know every detail. Where I am, who I'm with, what I'm doing, when I'll be home. You're paranoid. If you could just stop trying to control me, we'd still be married. But you can't help it. You know you're the only man I've ever cared about, right? Yeah, I do, I said. It used to drive me nuts. I was always worried you'd find someone else and leave me. That's never going to happen, she promised. I've never even considered another man since the day I met you. Sure, I go to dinners and dances with clients and colleagues, but that's just what I do. No one has touched me, and no one ever will. Do you believe me? Yes, and it's the same for me. I trust you, Bree. I know you'll never hurt me. I've always been in love with you, and I think you feel the same way. We were comfortable where we were. Well, I'm not comfortable anymore, she said. Those girls need a family. I love them almost as much as I love you, more than my job. And I want to be part of their lives. The only way that happens is if we do this together. Will you give me a chance, Mac? Will you marry me so we can be a family? I'll never have kids of my own. I'm too selfish for that. But these girls, we can take care of them. Marry me, and I'll make you happier than you've ever been. Okay, clearly you've had time to think about this, I said. Give me a little time too, okay? She looked at her watch. You got 20 minutes, she said. Wait, what? Do I have a deadline? I asked. Yeah, the girls are waiting outside. They'll be here in 10 minutes, and after a quick walk with Grandma, a car will pick us up and take us home. We quickly finished our food and stepped outside. A limo was waiting, but the girls were nowhere in sight. The driver mentioned they were walking the dog. He didn't seem too happy about it, probably not a fan of dog drool on the seats. After a few minutes, I saw the girls hurrying toward us. Let's go, Maggie said as they approached. Some guy was watching us and Grandma doesn't like him. He growled at him. I looked down the street and saw a young man walking our way. He looked about 20, with tattoos, piercings, a knit cap, and a hoodie. His sagging pants barely stayed on. He probably thought he looked intimidating. What are you staring at? He snapped at me. Nothing. We're just leaving, I replied. It's all yours. Nice jacket, fancy car, pretty women, he sneered. Looks like you've got some cash. The guy was nuts. I stood a good 8 inches taller than him and outweighed him by at least 100 pounds. No beer belly either. You better move along, kid, I told him. My dog really doesn't like you. He got about 4 feet from us. I'm not scared of any dog, he said. How much cash you got on you? He reached under his jacket and I caught a glimpse of metal. I kicked him square in the chest, sending him flying backward. A weapon fell out of his pants. Maggie lost her grip on Granville's leash as he lunged. The guy managed to protect his face with his arm, but I heard the crunch as Granville broke his forearm. He screamed, and Granville shredded his sleeve. Granville, down, I commanded. He backed off, sitting by my side. The guy writhed on the ground as I knelt next to him, Granville close by. Take it, Grandma, I said. Granville lunged forward, his jaws closing near the guy's neck. I think you're an idiot, I told him. What are you, some kind of moron? He nodded, fear etched on his face. Say it, I demanded. He didn't respond. Fight, Grandma, I ordered. The guy whimpered as blood trickled from where Granville's teeth grazed his neck. The sound of Granville's breathing filled the air. Say it, I repeated. I'm an idiot, he whispered. How much money do you have on you? I asked. Hand it over. He reached into his pocket, but Granville squeezed a little harder. Slowly, I warned. He pulled out a wad of cash and handed it to me. Let him go, Grandma, I said. Granville released him and the guy scrambled backward. I'll give you a 20-yard head start, I told him. Then I'm sending the dog after you. Better run fast. He bolted like a sprinter, but his pants fell halfway down. He stumbled, yanked them up with his good hand, and took off. You need a belt, I called after him. I turned back to the girls, who stood there with their mouths hanging open. I kicked the weapon into a storm drain. What? I asked. Bree was the first to speak. You're one nasty son of a witch, Mac. Remind us never to piss you off? The girls rushed over, and I hugged them. Oh my God, Mac, Stokely whispered into my chest. I thought that guy was scary, but you didn't even break a sweat. You did it for us, didn't you? Well, nobody messes with my girls, I told her. He even left you a little something for your college fund. I handed her the cash. She counted it. $700. The guy must have mugged a few people recently. She split it with Maggie, and we got into the limo. As I leaned back, hugging Maggie, I noticed something. A van's coming for us, I said. I know, Bree replied. It's got some of our stuff. I raised an eyebrow. Yeah, I know I take a lot for granted, she laughed. Girls, I said, yes, Bree and I will get married again, and you'll stay with us. The girls gasped and screamed. Really? Maggie asked. She's really not a witch. You were right. We love Bree. She's been so good to us. We have all these new clothes, and she got us into this amazing school. We'll make you both proud. I promise. We know you will, sweetheart. Don't worry, Bree reassured them. I was still in shock, trying to form words, but nothing came out. Mac, you okay? Stokely asked. Bree chuckled. No, he's in full panic mode. His perfectly ordered world is about to get flipped upside down. His house is spotless, everything in perfect condition. Now he'll have underwear hanging in the shower, mixed up books, and drink rings on the coffee table, and it'll drive him crazy. I don't even know how he handles living with Granville. We'll just have to love him enough that he won't care about crumbs on the table. Think we can do that? I think we can, Maggie laughed. I'm not sure how, Bree started. But oh, he loves pretty girls. Just bat your eyelashes and he'll melt. He'll be mad at me, but you girls will have to love us through it. Wait a minute, I groaned. I didn't exactly agree to any of this. Bree, like her usual whirlwind self, was sweeping us all along. Do you love Bree? Stokely asked me. Yes, I love her, on the other side of the city, I joked. Yeah, but we all need to be together, Maggie said. They all burst out laughing at my remark, and I had to join them. The idea was absurd. How had I lost control so quickly? As usual, Brianna had just taken over. What started as my little attempt to help the girls had snowballed into a marriage and adoption plan. It was wild how small actions could send your life spiraling out of control. I thought it was reckless, and told Bree so. When we got back to my house, there was a flurry of activity. Movers were everywhere, hauling in piles of stuff and placing them in different rooms. To my surprise, loads of women's clothes started showing up in Maggie and Stokely's rooms. Where did all this come from? I asked Maggie as she zipped past. Bree took us shopping a few times, she said, before disappearing into her room. Bree popped her head out of my bedroom. Mac, do you ever throw anything away? You still have things from when we were married. I'm getting rid of this junk. I need drawer and closet space. I rushed over to rescue my high school Letterman jacket from the trash. Stop it, Brianna, I shouted. You can't just throw my stuff away. If I didn't want it, I wouldn't keep it. This is my house, and I'll throw your Boney back out if you don't stop. She stuck her head out and glared at me. Boney back, huh? She snorted. Then she grabbed my sleeve and dragged me into the bedroom, which looked like a tornado had hit it. In one swift move, she locked the door, pulled her dress over her head, and leaned over the bed. My breath caught. She wasn't wearing any underwear. We made love, and the next morning I slept in until 10 o'clock. After stumbling into the shower, shaving, and freshening up, I finally felt somewhat human again. Bree was still asleep, her fiery red hair falling across her face as she lay on her stomach. Damn, her bum was incredible. I wandered into the living room and found Granville fast asleep, drooling all over a pile of my best shirts. I sighed, grabbed a glass of orange juice and a bun, and called to him. Come on, Grandma, let's get out of here. He lifted his head, rolled his eyes, and groaned as he got to his feet. We headed to the backyard, where he did his business before flopping down on my legs. The sun was warm, and I felt lazy, like a lizard basking in the heat. It was unusually warm for this time of year. The door opened, and Stokely stepped out with a glass of milk and a bun. Hello, Angel, I waved. Hi, Mac, she said, closing the door behind her. After a moment, she walked over to the glider where I was sitting. Is there room for me? She asked. I shifted over, and she curled up on my lap, resting her feet on the empty space. She sighed, took a bite of her bun, and looked at me with those big green eyes. Mac, she began, crumbs falling onto our laps. I interrupted. Finish eating, drink your milk, and then talk. She giggled and waited until her mouth was empty. Mac, she started again. If you adopt us, will you be our dad and Bree, our mom? Is that what you'd like? I asked. Oh, yes, she said. Bree would be the coolest mom ever. You're not exactly cool, but you're reliable. I love you, and I think you'd be the best dad in the world. I almost choked. Well, I muttered, being reliable is better than being cool, right? She laughed. I didn't mean it like that. I just mean Bree's like a force of nature and you're like a mountain. You know, she really, really loves you. She talks about you all the time. She's told us everything about you two. Do you love her? Yes, sweetie, but like you said, she's a force of nature. Loving her is like loving a thunderstorm or a wildfire. Mountains don't care about thunderstorms or wildfires, she said. Maggie looks a lot like her. I'm more like you. She pressed herself against my chest. I think we could be the calm at the center of their storm. She looked up at me. I want you to be our dad, Mac. I never thought we'd find someone like you. And Bree, too. Her voice cracked a little. We were so scared and alone. Mac, do you have room in your life for girls like us? I hugged her tighter. In my heart, Stokely, there's always been a place for you and Maggie. I've wanted someone like you to love me. For years, I didn't think I'd ever have this. Bree never showed any interest in having kids. And I think you girls turned her world upside down just like you did mine. I've seen the way she looks at you. It's like she woke up one day and realized she loves being a mother. You've changed her. You were right about her, she admitted. She's amazing. It's overwhelming sometimes. She makes a decision and you just get pulled along. I laughed. That's always been Bree. The first time I met her, I went to an amusement park with some college friends. She decided I was going to be her ride buddy. I'd actually gone because I liked another girl, but Bree dragged me away, and we never saw the rest of the group. We were 20, and I fell in love with her that day. She's like a virus. She invades your life and takes over. We had our first fight a month after we got married. What did you fight about? She asked. You're going to think this is silly. It was about shoes. She kept moving mine and putting hers in their place. I had to dig through her stuff to find mine. She thinks I'm obsessive. She's probably right. But is it too much to ask that she keep her shoes on her side of the closet? She exploded. And then I started driving her crazy, and she drove me crazy. I like to have a plan, and she's totally spontaneous. It's just who she is. I love that about her, but it also drives me nuts. She loves that I'm organized, but it drives her nuts. And those differences just kept clashing. Stokely giggled. Maggie and I fight about stuff like that too. She's always losing things. And then she just decides on the spur of the moment what we're going to do. I think we need to change a little, Mac. We need to go with the flow more. But they need to change too. They need to understand we like things in their place. Do you think we can figure this out? I don't know, I admitted. Bree and I never had a reason to try. Our relationship is weird. I love her more now than when we were married, and I think she feels the same. But she's not one to talk about it. She just does things. We're closer now than we ever were when we were married. I like her better now. Back then I loved her, but we were always angry. We got to a point where we didn't need to change, but I think we were too immature and selfish. Maybe you and Maggie made us realize what we were missing. The idea of being a family is exciting, but also terrifying. What if we screw it up? We could lose everything. I hate that kind of risk. I know, but sometimes you have to take a chance, she said. You can't get anything good without risking that it might go wrong. I hugged her, and she snuggled against me. You're the wisest 11-year-old I've ever met, I said. I'll be 12 next month, she replied. We finished the bun and headed back home. The others were still asleep, so we took Grandma for a walk. By the time we returned, the sleepyheads were up. Bree and Maggie, never morning people, looked like groggy, beautiful cats, stretching and yawning. After their showers, they were like new, full of energy. Bree whisked us away to get our marriage license, file for adoption, and start temporary custody. Later, we had seafood for dinner, and the girls couldn't stop raving about the food and prices. Wow, Mac, you must make a lot of money, Maggie said. I chuckled. I make about $90,000 a year, which is more than enough to support us. But Bree? She makes 10 times more. They stared at her in shock. Bree laughed. It's just money. The point is, we can treat you girls whenever you want. And honestly, Mac cooks better than most restaurants. You cook? Maggie asked. Bree nodded. Yes, but simple things. Anyone can follow a recipe, but this guy, he's a genius in the kitchen. She's pretty good too, I added, if only she could stay focused. Bree playfully hit me. Make one mistake and he'll never let it go, she joked. I grinned. In our first year, she burnt food so badly, not even the dog would eat it. She'd take it outside and leave it under a tree, like some kind of burnt offering. Everyone laughed. Bree, in a great mood, snuggled up to me and the girls giggled. We've never eaten anywhere this nice, Maggie said. Bree gave her a serious look. Maggie, say it again with confidence. Maggie smiled, straightened up, and repeated herself with pride. Bree grinned. See, we may be from Detroit, but we've got class. The girls beamed, clearly proud. Over time, Bree taught them everything, from how to dress to how to walk, talk, and carry themselves. In just 6 months, they went from street smart to sophisticated, excelling in everything they did. That night, Bree was excited. Back home, she told the girls, "Turn on the TV and leave it on all night." They laughed, knowing what was coming next. She grabbed my hand and led me to the bedroom. "We're celebrating tonight," she said with a mischievous smile. "What are we celebrating?" I asked. "The start of something incredible," she whispered. "I love you, Mac. I'll remind you of that every night and show you just how special we are. Tonight, we take it to a new level. Ready?" "Show me," I said, feeling the heat between us. With a smile, she let her fiery red hair down. A rare sight. Her hair fell in waves down her back, making her even more irresistible. She turned, her eyes gleaming. "Unzip me," she murmured. I slowly unzipped her dress, feeling the tension build as the fabric slid off her shoulders. She stood before me in high heels and a lacy white bra, arching her back slightly, more stunning than ever. Bree always exuded confidence, but tonight was different. She radiated sensuality as she dropped her bra and teased, "Looks like you're overdressed." "And what are we going to do about that?" I asked, my voice full of anticipation. She moved closer, her body flowing smoothly, and gently pushed me onto the bed. Kneeling beside my hips, she unbuttoned my shirt, slipping it off and briefly trapping my arms before tossing it aside. With skilled hands, she undid my belt and pants, pulling them down along with my socks and shoes. I lay there, fully exposed, overwhelmed by her intensity. This wasn't just physical. It was Bree at her most vulnerable. We made love, and afterward, I felt a new depth in our connection. She looked at me, her eyes soft but full of emotion. "Mac, I love you," she said, her voice trembling. "I've been selfish, never really giving myself to anyone until now. Do you want me? I'm ready to be your friend, lover, wife, and a mother to the girls. Will you help me? Be patient with me. You'll never regret it." I kissed her deeply. "I love you more than anything. You'll need to be patient with me too. We're a team, and we can do this together." "I'll do anything for you and the girls," she whispered. "I'm scared I'll be a bad mom. I've always feared it. That's why I never wanted kids." "I don't know how to be a father either," I laughed. "But I think we'll figure it out." "I don't know how to be a good wife," she admitted. "We messed up before." "I know," I agreed. "But it wasn't all you." "It was," she said. "I was immature, but I'll try to grow up." "Me too," I said, holding her close. Eventually, we drifted off to sleep. The next morning, we showered together, laughing and teasing. Afterward, Bree put on her pajamas, glowing with happiness. "What's going on?" I asked. "We'll have guests soon," she said with a sly smile. I shrugged, put on some clothes, and sure enough, there was a knock at the door. Stokely burst in, followed by the family dog, and soon Maggie joined too. We had a playful wrestling match, with the dog winning, of course. After a while, we all headed out for breakfast. Later, Bree announced we had an appointment. "Where?" I asked, suspicious. "You'll see," she said with a grin. We drove to the courthouse, and as we entered, I started to understand. "Do you have business here?" I asked. "Yes, a very important case," she laughed. Inside, Bree knelt down and pulled a small box from her purse. "Mac, will you marry me again?" she asked, her voice confident. "This time, it's forever. I never stopped loving you, and I want to be your wife again." She held our old wedding rings along with her engagement ring. "Brianna, are you sure?" I asked, my heart racing. "I've never been more sure," she replied. "Girls, help me out. He's so stubborn." "Yes, please, Mac," they begged. "We want to be a family. We love you and Bree." How could I resist? In about 10 minutes, we were married again. To celebrate, Bree took us to a new Greek restaurant. As I sat there, looking at Bree, the girls, and our future, I felt my life unfolding. The most beautiful woman was my wife, and I had 2 amazing daughters who were growing up fast. Their happiness filled me with joy. Could we make this work? Only time would tell. It took a month to get custody of the girls. Bree worked tirelessly, and when it finally happened, they were the happiest I'd ever seen them. And so were we. Bree sold her apartment and moved in with me. I worried about us getting on each other's nerves, but it went better than I expected. A few weeks after the wedding, Bree forgot to call us after a dinner with a client. When she came home, We were all waiting. Stokely held up the phone, and Bree immediately realized her mistake. Without saying a word, she burst into tears, dropping to her knees in front of us. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I forgot to call. I'll do my best not to let it happen again." Her apology was a turning point. Bree rarely apologized, so this showed real growth. Stokely hugged her first, then Maggie, and finally, I joined them. "It's okay, we understand," I said. From that moment, Bree and I made more effort to make each other happy, and the girls were great at helping us. We had small disagreements, but I'd never felt more content. Bree enrolled the girls in the private school where I taught, and we grew closer during our daily rides together. They shared their thoughts, dreams, and worries, filling my life with energy. After school, they'd do their homework, and then we'd walk the dog before dinner. Dinner was usually at 5, and Bree would join us around 6:30. If she was running late, she'd call, and we'd go out for dinner instead. When Maggie turned 16, she only wanted one thing: her driver's license. She studied hard and passed on her first try. The night before her birthday, Bree casually brought up a new idea in bed. "I want to buy Maggie a car," she said. "Okay, what kind?" I asked. "A new Camaro convertible," she said with a gleam in her eye. "How much will that cost?" I asked. "Mac, does it really matter?" she replied, rolling her eyes. "Do you think we're going broke?" "No, I'd just like to know," I chuckled. "Sorry," she smiled, kissing me. "I think it'll be about $60,000. I whistled. "That's a lot for a car." "She deserves it," Bree said softly. "Yes, she does," I agreed. We ordered the car, a bright yellow Camaro with black stripes and a sleek black interior. Bree insisted on getting the big V8 engine, thinking it would hold its value better. And although I had some reservations, she was probably right. When the car arrived, we parked it in the garage and waited until Maggie's birthday morning. The next day, as usual, the girls grabbed their bags and followed me to the car for school. Bree was already in the garage, but I hadn't unlocked the doors. "Dad, let us in," Stokely said, sounding confused. "You're not riding with me today," I said teasingly. Maggie looked puzzled. "You're driving, Maggie," I said, holding out the keys. "Mom's not going to work?" Maggie asked, still not catching on. "No," I said, motioning toward the garage. "She's leaving. But what are you going to drive?" Maggie looked confused, and then I pressed the garage door opener. As the door lifted, her new Camaro came into view. Her big green eyes widened in shock. They both stood still, speechless. Suddenly, Maggie started crying, tears streaming down her face as she trembled, unable to speak. I jumped out of the car, and Bree rushed over, wrapping her arms around Maggie. "What's wrong, honey?" I asked, worried. "We thought you'd be happy. This is your car. It's for your birthday." Maggie buried her face in Bree's chest, crying too hard to answer. Stokely hugged her too, and we stood there holding Maggie until she could calm down enough to talk. Finally, Maggie whispered, "I don't need a car. I love you both so much, and this is too much. Stokely and I already talked about it. We don't need anything. We just need you to love us." I kissed her cheek. "We love you so much, Maggie," Bree said, her voice shaking. "We love you both more than anything in the world. Having you in our lives is a dream come true. We love giving you things because it makes us happy to see you happy. It's one of the ways we show our love." Now Stokely was crying too. I hugged them both. "Let's go check out the car," I said gently. "At least take a look." They wiped their tears and let us lead them to the garage. I opened the driver's door for Maggie, and Bree opened the passenger side for Stokely. Maggie put her hands on the steering wheel, smiling through her tears. "It suits you," I told her softly. "Go ahead, start it up." Maggie turned the key, and the V8 engine roared to life. Both girls giggled through their tears, excitement starting to take over. I knocked on the window, and Maggie rolled it down. I leaned in and kissed her forehead. "See you at school," I said with a grin. She drove out of the garage and stopped just outside the driveway. Then she suddenly ran back, throwing herself into our arms, kissing us over and over. "I love you so much," she cried. "Thank you. You're the best mom and dad ever." She ran back to the car, and they drove off, the engine rumbling. I turned to Bree, and she was crying too. Somehow, I realized I had tears running down my face as well. "Look at us," I said, laughing through my tears. "You'd think we were the ones turning 16. "It was a great idea, Bree. You're incredible," I said, hugging her tightly. For Stokely's 16th birthday, we did the same thing. It wasn't quite as emotional as Maggie's, but it was still a special moment. The girls were growing up fast, and our family was stronger than ever. We took them on trips to Hawaii and Belize, celebrated their achievements, and watched them grow into amazing young women. When Maggie graduated from high school, she was already well into her college studies. The day Stokely started college, I came home to find Bree sitting on the couch, crying. I sat down beside her and wrapped my arms around her. We sat in silence for a while, just holding each other. Eventually, Bree looked up at me, her blue eyes full of tears. "Our kids are grown up, Mac," she whispered. "I know," I replied, kissing her gently. "That's what kids do." She cupped my face in her hands, looking deeply into my eyes. "Let's have another one, Mac," she said, her voice trembling. "This time, just you and me. I want a baby, Mac." She broke down, crying harder. "I never thought I'd want this. I love you so much, and I miss them so much already. I want to do it again. It was so amazing. I know they're only 60 miles away, but I miss them." "I miss them too, kitten," I whispered, holding her close. "Maybe we should start practicing if we're serious about this baby." Bree gasped, looking up at me with wide eyes. "Really? You mean it? You want a baby?" "Of course," I said, smiling. "I hope it's a red-haired girl just like you. I love you with all my heart, Bree." I picked her up and carried her through the empty house to our bedroom, ready to start the next chapter of our lives. We had to kick Granville out of the room, but that didn't matter. We were building something new, something beautiful. As I drifted off to sleep, my eyes landed on the picture of Maggie and Stokely on the nightstand. They didn't look like strangers anymore. They looked like family.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
My wife, Anna, had been working on a special project for the past 4 months. It wasn't a personal endeavor, but she was the project lead and held the responsibility for its success. This project was crucial for both her and her company, Covington Group, as there was a real chance the company would collapse if it wasn't completed successfully. Anna had a bachelor's degree from Albright and an MBA from Wharton. She was definitely the smartest person in our family. I, on the other hand, started working as an auto mechanic right after high school, and after 21 years, I was still in the same trade. I didn't mind, though. I enjoyed the work, and it paid well enough to support Anna through college and raise our 2 kids. We weren't living luxuriously, but we were getting by. Anna got pregnant just 3 months after we married, at 18. The first few years of our marriage were tough as we lived with my parents in their big house. With 4 of my siblings already gone, they had the space, and it also meant we had built-in childcare while Anna pursued her college degree. It took her 6 years to complete her 4-year degree, thanks to 2 pregnancies along the way, but she managed to get through it. Meanwhile, I worked steadily and picked up overtime whenever necessary. After Anna graduated from Wharton, we rented our own place. She had offers from several large firms, but they all required us to relocate. I was okay with moving, but Anna wanted to stay close to home. That's why she chose to work at Covington Group. It paid well, but more importantly, it gave her responsibility and the chance to move up in the company. Anna was a dedicated, hardworking employee. The big presentation was set for Thursday at the Recent Hotel in Philadelphia. I took a few days off from my job to help her however I could. In the end, all I really did was prepare some meals for her when she came home. I didn't understand much about her job, and honestly, I didn't feel the need to know. High-level corporate business had never really interested me. Businessmen from Europe, Asia, and South America frequently visited, and the company covered their airfare and provided rooms at the expensive Recent Hotel. From what Anna had mentioned, the company seemed to be overestimating its finances, which made the extravagant spending even more concerning. Her presentation was crucial, not only for her and the company but also for the more than 200 employees who depended on its success. Until Tuesday evening, everything seemed to be going smoothly. Anna came home in a new gray suit with a white blouse. She laid out everything she needed on the bed in the guest room. When it came to housekeeping, she was pretty laid back, but when it came to work, she was incredibly meticulous. I didn't understand why she needed to lay out her fancy underwear, but I kept quiet. In addition to her suit for the presentation, she also had a few cocktail dresses for the social events surrounding the conference. I had always avoided such events, but I felt obligated to attend with her if she wanted me there. She thanked me for the offer, but said it wasn't necessary. Before leaving work, Anna made sure everything she needed, materials and equipment, was neatly packed in the trunk of her Volvo. She drove the car herself to ensure everything was in perfect condition. She had all of Wednesday to prepare and socialize with her guests in the evening. Anna was so skilled at what she did that I felt like it might be better if I just stayed out of her way. By Wednesday night, Anna had double-checked everything and was ready to unwind. All she needed now was a hot shower and a good night's sleep. That's when I made my mistake. While she was showering, I started going through her things on the bed, thinking I might help out. But instead, I ended up causing trouble. As I shifted things around, a small white envelope fell out of her makeup bag. It was from a drugstore, but not the usual one we used. Inside were 10 pills, and the instructions were unclear. Take one pill, and if necessary, a second pill 12 hours later. I had no idea what the medication was, and I thought it might be something to help with anxiety or nerves, but the instructions didn't make sense. The prescription was in her name. I put the envelope back where I found it as Anna finished her shower. I decided I wanted to know more about the medication before confronting her. Of course, mentioning it would mean admitting I had gone through her things, and I hated dilemmas like that. After Anna had gotten ready for bed, I went to the computer and typed in PR. 10 minutes later, I joined her under the covers, but I lay awake all night, wondering why she had picked up a prescription for the morning after pill, especially after I had a vasectomy 10 years ago. The next morning, I woke up early, but I wasn't rested. I took a long walk, hoping it would help clear my head. Reluctantly, I headed home, dreading what might happen when I got there. Our son, Josh, had joined the Navy after high school and was in his freshman year in San Diego. Our daughter, Elaine, married her childhood sweetheart last year and had just moved to Dallas. That left just Anna and me. I missed the kids, but I looked forward to growing old with Anna. She was the only woman I'd ever been interested in, and now it seemed everything was falling apart. If Anna was having an affair, she was hiding it well. Of course, I never checked up on her, never looked at her emails or cell phone calls. I had no reason to. I trusted her completely. I had no idea what she was doing at work or after work, but I trusted her. When I got home, Anna was in the kitchen. "Where the hell have you been? Want some eggs or something?" "No, just coffee." Not feeling very talkative. "What's wrong, honey?" she asked. "It's only for 3 days. You can come if you want, but you'll be bored to death. I really don't want to go, but I hate leaving you alone. I worry when you're not here." "That's sweet, darling, but it'll be fine. I'm not leaving the hotel most of the time. I'll spend most of today making sure the conference room is ready, and tonight I'll be meeting with potential clients. Tomorrow, I probably won't even have time to pee. I'll be home as early as possible on Friday. I promise you a great weekend if you know what I mean." That all sounds good, but you can't blame me for worrying. I'm just an auto mechanic, and I have this beautiful, successful wife. Sometimes it feels like you're more focused on advancing your career than your family. "Stop it," she snapped. "I've always respected what you do for a living. You raised 2 great kids and put me through college. You're a great husband, a great father, and a good provider. Don't ever forget that." I finished my coffee as she cleared the table. "Do you want me to call you?" "No, that's not a good idea. I'll have my cell phone off, and we'll turn off the room phone for the night so I can get some sleep. I'll call you every chance I get." I helped her load the car, and she was as meticulous about it as she was with everything else. It would take her about 3 hours to get to the recent hotel. I stood on the porch and watched her leave, but I didn't ask her about the pills. The rest of the morning, I stayed on the porch, feeling more worried than I ever had before. I felt small, insignificant, and out of my league. I was just a small-town guy with a mediocre job, and she was this successful, powerful woman. It felt like a mismatch, and I couldn't help but wonder if I should have noticed it earlier. I felt foolish. The best suit I owned was a blue blazer and a pair of pants. At least I had a few ties, even though they were at least a decade out of date. I had just finished getting dressed when the landline rang. "Hey, sweetie, I just wanted to let you know I got here okay. The drive was fine. Traffic wasn't too heavy. I'll call you tonight. I'm in room 714. If you need to reach me, you can call me on my cell, or I'll be at my parents' or my brother's tonight." "Okay, love you," I replied, hearing the click of the phone. I took my time heading to Philly, not going straight to the recent hotel. I stopped first to grab a steak and cheese, knowing it would be a long night. I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I parked in the hotel garage and just sat there for a while, unsure of when I should go inside. Eventually, my cell phone rang, and it made the decision for me. "Henry, everything's settled. I'm going downstairs to meet some people and have dinner. You didn't forget anything, did you?" "No, everything's fine. I've got everything in my room for tomorrow. Do you need anything?" "No, Henry, relax. I'm turning my phone off now. I'll call you tomorrow morning." "All right, Chuckles, have fun." "It's not fun, Henry, it's work," she said, and the line went silent. I didn't look too out of place in the hotel lobby. The restaurant and conference rooms were packed, so I could remain unnoticed. I picked up a little brochure showing the layout of the hotel rooms and wandered around, stopping to look at the crowd. I had no idea what I'd do if Anna saw me. I'd find out when the time came. I found an event board listing all the rooms being used by the various groups. Covington Group didn't have any rooms reserved for Wednesday night, which struck me as odd. Anna had said she wouldn't leave the hotel, but now I wasn't so sure. There were 3 dining rooms: family, casual, and fine dining. Anna wasn't one for dining with kids, so I went to the casual room first. It only took 5 minutes to confirm she wasn't there. I had better luck in the gourmet lounge. It was a cozy booth tucked in the corner, perfect for private meetings. Anna was wearing a black cocktail dress with a plunging neckline and pearls. She looked elegant, and her companions seemed to appreciate it. I recognized a few of the people Anna worked with, but this man wasn't one of them. He looked familiar, but I couldn't place him. The lounge wasn't crowded, and there were plenty of empty seats, so I had no trouble crossing the room. The candles on the tables were small, glass holders, and I blew out mine, telling the waiter it was bothering my glaucoma. I ordered my usual chicken dish and settled in. The waiter poured my coffee for the 3rd time. "Excuse me," I said. "The guy at the table across from me looks really familiar. Do you know who he is?" "Oh sure, that's Lewis Grant. He's a member of the town meeting and is expected to run for Congress in the next few years. Is that his wife with him?" "She's very pretty." "No, this is the first time I've seen her. He always uses that table for special ladies, if you know what I mean." I smiled and asked for the check. I had never seen Anna so attentive with a man before. It was as though she was hanging on every word he said, like he was some kind of god. They weren't being inappropriate, but it definitely wasn't a platonic or business exchange. When I left, they were finishing their 2nd bottle of wine. Now it all made sense, why she brought that fancy lingerie with her. I made myself comfortable in a corner of the lobby where I couldn't be seen. 10 minutes later, they walked out of the restaurant, Anna holding his hand as they made their way across the lobby to the elevator. I watched the elevator's floor indicators carefully. When it stopped on the 3rd floor, I felt a flicker of relief. It meant she hadn't taken him to her room. But when it didn't go to the 7th floor, my stomach sank. It meant she had gone to his room. Just in case I was wrong, I stayed in the lobby and watched the elevator for an hour. People came and went, but Anna wasn't one of them. I retrieved my empty suitcase from the car and headed to the front desk. Even though I could prove I was her husband, it was surprisingly difficult to get a keycard. After a phone call to the room with no answer, they relented. Finally, I was on my way to room 714 with the keycard. I didn't turn on the lights when I entered. Instead, I sat in the dark room for over an hour, making sure she wouldn't return just yet. I packed all her clothes and personal belongings, leaving nothing behind. I checked the package of Previn. There were still 10 pills left. On the dresser, everything was neatly arranged for her presentation the next day. I began filling the suitcase with the 24 specially bound promotional folders and 20 regular folders. A digital projector went in next, followed by her laptop. I took Anna's purse and cell phone, which she had left behind in the room. All she had with her was a small clutch, probably with just a tube of lipstick inside. I carefully checked every corner of the room, making sure I hadn't missed anything. Once I was sure I had everything, I placed her car keys and my wedding ring on the dresser. Aside from those 2 items, the room was entirely empty. The elevator took me straight to the parking garage, and I had no trouble carrying both suitcases. 20 minutes later, I was on the expressway, heading north. It was well past 3 a.m., and I hadn't realized how much time had passed. A little later, my cell phone rang. The caller ID showed the Reasons number. Henry? Yes? I responded. "Where are you?" she asked. "I'll be at the house soon," I said, and that was all. The line fell silent. Salesmen often say the first one to speak loses, and it felt like an eternity before she finally spoke again. "I'm sorry," she said, without asking any questions, and then hung up. I turned my phone off. It was clear she had gone back to her room. Later that day, she was supposed to give a presentation that would save her company and possibly earn her a promotion. I stored the suitcases in the attic of the garage. Anna never went there, and she never would have thought to look for anything there. At this point, I wasn't sure it mattered anymore. I gathered all my clothes and personal belongings. Most men have their own tools, and it's usually a necessity for the job. I stopped by the store to load mine into the Subaru, then picked up my last paycheck. By the time the banks were open, I withdrew all the money from my accounts. I had enough to live on for a few years, but I knew I'd need to find a job soon. Anna and I were similar in that we both loved to work, and I knew I would miss her. I spent a few hours in the Luray Caves and rented a room near Whiteville. I had no clear plan for what came next. On Saturday, I ended up at the Chattanooga Aquarium, mesmerized by the wildlife I had never seen before. I spent several hours just relaxing, and it felt like a good place to be. I bought a year pass to the aquarium, and by dinner time, I had secured a place to stay, a mobile trailer in a park. It was furnished and affordable. I didn't need much. On Monday morning, I planned to start looking for work. A good handyman can always find a job, especially if he's willing to work hard. I could keep a low profile until it was time to renew my driver's license or car tags, and I'd deal with those when the time came. On Sunday afternoon, I called Elaine. I felt like I should let her know what was going on, but it turned out Anna had already told her. She was straightforward with Elaine about what happened. She told her she cheated. I found out, I left, and she lost her job. I felt bad that she lost her job, but that was the price she had to pay. I asked Elaine to update Josh the next time she spoke to him, and I also mentioned that I'd check in about once a month to see how things were going. I didn't tell her where I was. By noon the following day, I had a job. It was just a short walk from the trailer park to the Waffle House, right in the middle of the route. What more could a man want? I don't know how they handled the paperwork, but they were paying me $20 an hour with no questions asked. I was content, and they were happy. I didn't even need to dip into the money I'd brought with me. About 2 months later, Elaine told me that Anna had moved out and was now living with her parents. Elaine didn't have any more details but was happy to hear that I was settled and doing well. Josh called from San Diego to let me know he was going on a cruise. He worked as an avionics technician on an aircraft carrier. He tried explaining his job, but it went over my head. I never really understood much about technical stuff. Both Josh and Elaine were careful not to say anything negative about their mother, and I appreciated that. Life settled into a routine. I kept in touch with Elaine at least weekly, and Josh and I began emailing regularly. Elaine spoke to Anna, but she didn't share much about what Anna was doing or where she was. I never filed for divorce, and it seemed Anna hadn't either. I got a Tennessee driver's license, and the Subaru's tags were updated. I started going to a local bar a couple of times a month, and even got involved with 2 girls who took turns as regular companions. They weren't looking for commitment, and neither was I, so it worked out for all of us. Life was good. That was a long time ago, and eventually, I stopped thinking about Anna. After a while, the Subaru started having trouble. I'd forgotten how long it had been, but the mileage was over 200,000. One day, as I was sipping a mug of beer, I realized it had been almost 5 years since I left. I'd kept in close touch with both children. By this time, Elaine had 2 kids of her own and wanted me to visit. Josh almost married a woman once, but at the last minute, he called it off. I worked 6 days a week, using Sundays to recover from Saturday nights. There was no good reason for someone to be knocking on my trailer door at 6 a.m. on a Friday. Their rudeness was met with the sight of a half-naked man opening the door in his boxer shorts, which, judging by the look on her face, was just as unpleasant for the woman at the door. She looked away, but her companion didn't seem as bothered. "Norm, I would have worn pants, but guests like this annoy me," I muttered. "We're looking for Henry Clay," they said. I didn't recognize them. "I don't know you. My name's Andrew Walker, and this is my wife, Tessa. We have a problem, and we're hoping you can help us. I'm sorry, but I don't work by moonlight. If you need something done on your car, you'll have to go to the shop." That earned me a few blank stares before the response came. "It's not about your job, it's more of a personal issue. Can we come in?" The inside of the trailer was a mess. I rarely had guests, so I rarely cleaned. Even my girlfriends preferred their place. "Be my guest, let me put on my pants," I said. As I entered the bedroom, I left the door open to show I was a gracious host, then threw on a shirt. "Would you like some coffee? It'll only take about 10 minutes. I moved some things off the couch for them to sit on. There was no answer to the coffee question. "We have an adopted daughter, 4 years old, and she needs a bone marrow transplant. We're hoping you can help us. We're willing to pay you if needed." "Buy my bone marrow?" I asked, acting like a wise ass, but then I realized they were serious. These people had a real problem. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. Please continue. Our best chance of finding a donor is next of kin, and you're our best hope." I didn't mean to sound dismissive, but I couldn't help it. "I think you've got the wrong guy. When was your daughter born?" "She'll be 5 years old in July," Tessa Walker answered, speaking for the first time. Her voice was sincere. "I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I had a vasectomy 15 years ago. There's no way I could be her father. Why was your name on the birth certificate?" "I can't answer that. Maybe you should ask her mother." There was a long silence. I felt bad for these people, but I didn't know how to help them. "What's the mother's name?" Anna Louise Clay. I froze. I couldn't find the words. Maybe I shouldn't have taken those damn pills from her all those years ago. If I hadn't, those people wouldn't have a daughter at all. I thought I had buried all this grief, but now it was creeping back. Old memories of my wife and that damn Philadelphia politician. Just when I thought I was done with all of it, it was back. God damn it. I muttered under my breath. I understand now, and I apologize for my rudeness and insensitivity. I'll do everything I can to help you. First, why can't Anna be a donor? Medically, she can't. She's too sick. Too sick? What's wrong with her? She's dying of liver failure. The doctors won't even consider her for a transplant. She's got less than 6 months to live. That doesn't make sense. She's always been in perfect health. I don't see why a diseased liver would stop her from donating bone marrow. The hospital won't accept her signature on the consent form. Are you saying there's something wrong with her head? I asked. They both remained silent, knowing the answer but not wanting to say it. I didn't want to make them feel more awkward. Just minutes earlier, I hadn't cared about them, but now I felt like I had to help and protect them. How did this happen? I asked. Could any of my kids help? Maybe, but we thought you were our best hope. Why don't you try going after your real father? We thought it was you. We have no idea who else it could be. Anna never mentioned another possible father. In fact, she was in no condition to explain anything, Tessa added. We got most of our information from the adoption agency. I needed to get the coffee going and take a leak. Excuse me for a moment, I said as I left them sitting there while I brewed the coffee. It only took a few minutes, and I quickly relieved myself, trying to be discreet. I had already embarrassed Tessa enough. Where do you live? I asked. Westchester, Pennsylvania. I'll make you a deal. If I tell you who your daughter's real father is, you have to promise me you'll pursue him relentlessly until you get what you need. What are you talking about? Your daughter's father is a prominent politician in Pennsylvania. He will deny everything and probably use legal documents to stop your efforts. But if you push hard enough to get him to admit the child is his, you might be able to shame him into helping. He could get her the bone marrow transplant, right? Yeah, sure, but how do we do that? I don't know. I'm just a mechanic. I work with metal, but I think the best way is to use television, radio, and newspapers. Politicians will do anything to avoid bad press. Do you have any friends who could help? Both of them were smiling now, as if my suggestion gave them hope. I think we can do this. Who is he? I asked. Louis Grant. He's running for U.S. Senate. I bet he'll do anything to avoid bad publicity. The coffee was ready, but Andrew and Tessa couldn't wait to leave. Before they went, I gave them the contact details for Elaine and Josh, in case they needed their help. I also asked them where Anna was. I figured I'd be in Pensacola before they even got back to Westchester. I got a haircut and bought a new shirt. Anna may have ruined my life, but I still wanted to look good when I saw her. I found her trailer, which was a newer, nicer double-wide. Her Volvo sat outside with a flat tire and a broken windshield. The woman who answered the door wasn't Anna. She looked like she'd been through something rough, drenched, with no makeup, and maybe in her mid-40s or early 50s. She looked worn out. Before I could say anything, I heard a voice. Well, I never expected to see you here. It was Henry Clay. You're putting me at a disadvantage, I said. Diana Brown, she said, gesturing me inside. Come on in. Honey, can I get you a beer? No, thank you. I'm here to see Anna. Diana walked across the room, stopping at the buffet in the dining area. Here she is, Henry, she said, her hand pointing to a brass urn in the middle of the empty buffet. I didn't move. I just stood there, staring at the urn, realizing I was too late. Can I have a beer now? I asked. Anna had moved to Pensacola after giving up her baby for adoption. She bought the trailer with the money she received from Covington Group after being laid off. She had a profit-sharing 401k and vacation and sick leave benefits. Eventually, she took a job at a local garment factory in the shipping department, where she met Diana. Diana rented a room from Anna, and over time, Anna's drinking took over her life. She started with wine and gradually switched to stronger, cheaper alcohol. Eventually, she lost her job due to her addiction and began draining her savings. She never dated or went out. Diana stayed with Anna, covering her utilities and buying food that Anna wouldn't eat. It took over 3 years for Anna to drink herself to death. Amazingly, she left a will, leaving me the trailer and her Volvo. Diana explained that Anna had been devastated by what she had done. She never tried to prevent or terminate the pregnancy, and the adoption had been arranged months before the baby was born. Afterward, she stopped working, except for occasional odd jobs that she did poorly. According to Diana, Anna seemed to lose all ambition and purpose in life. She spoke about me often but was too afraid to contact me. Elaine had given her my number, but she never called. It was as if that one-night affair had hurt her more than it had hurt me. I stayed for 2 weeks, then sold Diana's trailer for $1 and got $3,000 for the Volvo. 2 days later, I was in Westchester, visiting my new friends, Andrew and Nadine. Lewis Grant initially resisted, but Andrew and Nadine applied pressure until he gave in. He insisted on DNA tests, which confirmed he was the father. To save face, he was essentially forced into agreeing to a bone marrow transplant, which turned out to be successful. However, his political career and family life took a hit. His polls plummeted so quickly that his party replaced him with another candidate just months before the election. His wife filed for divorce and made it public. Now, Anna and I are traveling to Dallas to see Elaine and my grandchildren. I'm not sure how long I'll keep Anna with me, probably until I find someone else. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
James stared at the text message on his phone, his hand trembling. His world felt like it was collapsing. The words on the screen burned into his mind. I saw Becky with another man. They were kissing. I'm so sorry, James. The message was from his mother. James struggled to breathe, his chest tight with disbelief. How could Becky do this? To him, to their family. The sound of the front door opening and closing snapped him back to the moment. Becky was home. His heart pounded as he rose from the couch, determination mixing with dread. He needed answers. Becky walked into the living room, her cheerful expression fading the instant she saw James's face. What's wrong? She asked, concern coloring her voice. James held up his phone, his voice barely a whisper. Is it true? He asked, trying to keep his emotions under control. Becky's face turned pale, her eyes widening with fear. What are you talking about? She stammered. But James could see the guilt etched into her expression. Don't lie to me, James shouted, his voice reverberating through the room, making Becky flinch. The weight of years of trust and love seemed to shatter with his words. My mom saw you, he continued, his voice breaking. She saw you kissing another man. How could you do this to me? To our kids? Tears streamed down Becky's face, her voice trembling as she tried to speak. James, I can explain, she pleaded, desperation clear in her tone. James let out a bitter laugh, devoid of joy. It was a sound filled with pain, disbelief, and a heartbreak too deep for words. Explain, James demanded, his voice raw and trembling. Explain how you broke our wedding vows, how you threw away our whole life together. His voice cracked on the last word, the weight of his emotions threatening to crush him. Becky sank onto the couch, her shoulders shaking with sobs. I'm sorry, she whispered, her words muffled by her tears. I didn't mean for it to happen. It just did. James paced the room, his anger growing with every step. The walls seemed to close in on him, suffocating and oppressive. Who is he? He demanded, his voice sharp. Do I know him? Becky shook her head, avoiding his eyes. No, she murmured. You don't know him. He's someone I met at work. Do you love him? James asked, the question twisting in his throat. He dreaded the answer but needed to hear it. Becky hesitated, her silence louder than words. Finally, she spoke, her voice trembling. I have feelings for him, she admitted, each word a dagger to James's heart. But I don't love him, not like I love you. The confession hit James like a blow to the stomach. The room spun, and he clutched the back of a chair to steady himself. If you love me, he whispered, his voice barely audible, you wouldn't have done this. Hours passed as they talked, argued, and cried. The sun set and rose again, but neither noticed. Becky tried to explain her actions, her voice breaking as she spoke of loneliness and feeling unappreciated. She described how James's long hours at work had left her isolated, how she had begun to doubt whether he still loved her. James couldn't believe what he was hearing. He had always thought they had a good life together, a life they had built with love, effort, and sacrifice. They had 3 wonderful children, Emma, the youngest at 12, Jack, 15, and Lily, 17. Their home was in a great neighborhood, and both he and Becky had successful careers. How could Becky throw all of it away? I worked those long hours for us, James said, his voice hoarse from talking through the night. To give you and the kids everything you wanted. How could you think I didn't love you? Becky wiped at her ruined makeup, fresh tears streaking her cheeks. I know you love me, James. But love isn't just about providing. It's about being there, really being present. When was the last time we had a real conversation that wasn't about the kids or the bills? James opened his mouth to protest, but then stopped. He couldn't remember. As the sun rose, painting the sky in soft pinks and golds, James made a decision. I'm going to talk to a lawyer, he said, his voice heavy with exhaustion but firm with resolve. I need to know what my options are. Becky's eyes widened, and fresh tears began to spill. Are you going to divorce me? She asked, her voice trembling. I don't know, James admitted, running a hand through his disheveled hair. But I need to protect myself and our kids. The next day, after a sleepless night, James sat across from a lawyer. The news wasn't what he wanted to hear. Janet, a kind-faced woman with a calm demeanor, laid out the reality. Because you've been married for so long and have children together, a divorce will be complicated and expensive, she explained. There's a strong chance you'll have to pay alimony, and you'll need to divide all your marital assets. James leaned forward, frustration and disbelief clear on his face. But she's the one who cheated. Janet nodded sympathetically. I understand, James, and that's something we can raise in court, but the division of assets and spousal support doesn't always depend on fault in most states. The court will focus on the length of your marriage, your financial situation, and what's best for your children. The weight of her words settled heavily on James's shoulders. It felt unfair. He had stayed faithful, worked hard for his family, and sacrificed so much. Yet the system seemed indifferent to that. As he left the lawyer's office, his mind was racing. He knew the road ahead would be painful and complicated, but he also knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to let this destroy him or his relationship with his kids. James protested, a fresh wave of anger surging through him. Janet nodded with a sympathetic expression. I understand, James, she said gently, but in the eyes of the law, that doesn't always matter as much as we think it should. The court's primary concern will be the welfare of your children. When James returned home, he found Becky sitting on the couch, her eyes red and swollen from crying. He relayed what the lawyer had told him, watching as her face crumpled, tears spilling once more. How can you do this to me? She cried, her voice rising in hysteria. You're ruining my life. James stared at her, disbelief and fury bubbling to the surface. The unfairness of her accusation hit him like a tidal wave, threatening to overwhelm him. I'm ruining your life? He shouted, his composure finally shattering. You're the one who cheated. What about our kids? Did you think about how this would affect them? Becky wiped her tears, her shoulders slumping as if the weight of her actions had finally pressed her into defeat. She looked down, unable to meet his gaze. I didn't mean for this to happen, she whispered, her voice trembling. I didn't want to hurt anyone. James shook his head, his anger simmering but tempered by exhaustion. But you did, he said, his voice quieter but no less intense. You hurt all of us. And now we have to live with the consequences. The room fell into a heavy silence, both of them sitting on opposite ends of the emotional chasm that had opened between them, unsure if it could ever be bridged. Of course I thought about them, Becky said quietly, her voice laced with sorrow. That's why I want to fix this. Can't we try to work it out? For the kids? James wanted to say no. Every part of him screamed to pack his bags and leave, to never look back. But as he opened his mouth to refuse, his gaze fell on a family photo on the mantel. It was from their last vacation, all 5 of them smiling on a sunlit beach, their faces filled with happiness. His children's joyful expressions seemed to plead with him, and his resolve wavered. He thought about his kids, how sad and confused they would be if he left. He imagined Lily, about to start her senior year of high school, trying to focus on college applications while dealing with the collapse of her family. He thought of Jack, already struggling with the pressures of being a teenager, now facing the added burden of their divorce. And little Emma, still so young and innocent, not understanding why her daddy wouldn't be living at home anymore. After what felt like hours, though it was probably only a few minutes, James spoke. We can try counseling, he said, his voice heavy with reluctance. But I'm not making any promises. Becky's face brightened with hope, but James raised his hand to stop her before she could speak. This doesn't mean I forgive you, he said firmly. And it doesn't mean we're okay. It just means I'm willing to try. For the kids' sake. Over the next few weeks, James and Becky attended marriage counseling. At first, it was difficult. They argued frequently, revisiting old wounds and resentments. James still carried anger and feelings of betrayal, while Becky fluctuated between defensive anger and tearful regret. But gradually, things began to improve, thanks to the guidance of their patient counselor, Dr. Reynolds. Dr. Reynolds worked with James and Becky to create a safe space where they could express their feelings without fear of being dismissed or attacked. Through her patient guidance, they learned to communicate with empathy rather than frustration. Instead of shouting over each other, they began to listen, truly listen, to the pain in each other's voices. As they dug deeper into the roots of their problems, it became clear that their issues went beyond the affair. The cracks in their marriage had been forming over time, unnoticed or ignored, until they became a wide chasm that neither knew how to cross. James, driven by his desire to provide for his family, had poured himself into his job, often working long hours, taking on extra projects, and focusing on financial stability. He believed that by providing material security, he was showing his love for Becky and the kids. But in doing so, he had unknowingly distanced himself from them emotionally. He didn't take time to connect with Becky in meaningful ways. No quiet moments together, no spontaneous gestures of affection, no deep conversations about their dreams and fears. He hadn't recognized that, beyond the bills and responsibilities, Becky needed more than just financial stability. She needed emotional closeness and reassurance that she was valued, not just as a partner, but as an individual. Becky, on the other hand, had begun to feel increasingly neglected. She had spent years trying to be the supportive wife and mother, putting her needs aside for the sake of the family. But as time passed, she began to feel invisible, unappreciated. The little things, simple conversations, shared laughter, or even just a warm touch, became scarce. As James became more consumed by his work, Becky began to feel alone in their marriage, unsure of her place in it. The emotional distance grew, and with it, a sense of resentment. In the absence of the attention and affection she craved, Becky began to seek validation elsewhere. The affair wasn't just about the other man. It was about Becky's longing for someone to see her, to make her feel valued and loved again. It was a desperate attempt to fill the emotional void she had been living with for so long. While Dr. Reynolds never justified Becky's actions, she helped James see that his own neglect had played a significant role in the breakdown of their connection. James began to understand that love wasn't just about providing. It was also about being emotionally present, about nurturing the bond they had once shared. As painful as it was to confront these truths, it forced both of them to acknowledge how their individual choices had contributed to the unraveling of their marriage. It was a painful but necessary step toward healing. For a while, it seemed like James and Becky were on the right path. They were talking more, truly listening to each other, and making a conscious effort to rebuild their marriage. They even started having date nights again, something they hadn't done in years. They would leave the kids with James's mom and enjoy a quiet dinner or catch a movie together. The moments of connection, the small gestures, the effort to rekindle what had once brought them together. Things were better, at least on the surface. But even as they worked to rebuild trust and restore the love that had been shattered, something inside James had changed. He couldn't forget what Becky had done. The betrayal was too profound, too raw. It wasn't something that could be wiped away by a few nights out or a couple of heartfelt conversations. The wound ran too deep. Every time Becky was late coming home from work, a knot twisted in James's stomach. He wondered if she was with someone else, if the same pattern was starting to repeat itself. When her phone buzzed with a text message, he had to fight the intense urge to grab it, to see who was messaging her, to confirm his suspicions. His trust in her had been broken, and no matter how hard he tried, it was hard to ignore the doubts that lingered in the back of his mind. The trust wasn't there anymore, and deep down, James wasn't sure if it ever would be. His mom, seeing the pain James was carrying, urged him to leave Becky. During their weekly phone calls, she would tell him, "She broke your heart once. She'll do it again. You deserve better than this, James." Each time, James felt the weight of her words, her concern for him, and part of him agreed. He deserved peace, stability, and trust. But another part of him resisted. James didn't want to break up his family. He loved his kids deeply and couldn't bear the thought of them growing up in a broken home. He remembered his own parents' divorce, the emotional fallout, the feeling of being caught in the middle, the sense of loss and confusion that followed. He hadn't been ready for that pain as a child, and he couldn't fathom putting his own children through the same heartache. The idea of disrupting their world, of causing them that same level of hurt, made James hesitate, even as his own heart ached. He was stuck, caught between the pain of betrayal and the love he had for his children. Every day, he tried to reconcile the two conflicting emotions, but he didn't know how to move forward. The pain was still there, and though he was trying to forgive Becky, the scars from what she had done lingered, haunting him with every step they took toward rebuilding. James made a difficult decision. He would stay with Becky until their youngest child, Emma, turned 18, and went off to college. After that, he planned to leave. It wasn't an ideal situation, but he believed it was the best thing for his kids. He wanted to provide them with a stable home and two parents under one roof for as long as possible. The years passed slowly. James and Becky lived together, but their relationship was never the same. They were like two strangers sharing a house, going through the motions of marriage without any of the love or intimacy that had once defined their bond. They focused on caring for the kids, maintaining a sense of normalcy in the home, but the love and trust between them had been irrevocably lost. James poured himself into his children's lives, determined to be the best father he could be. He never missed a soccer game or a school play, helped with homework, taught them to drive, and was always there to listen or offer a shoulder to cry on. Becky, too, did her best to be a good mother. She baked cookies for bake sales, chaperoned school dances, and worked hard to create a warm and loving home. Yet, there was always a sadness in her eyes, a lingering regret that never quite faded. The kids, perceptive as they were, sensed the tension between their parents. Lily, the oldest, once asked James why he and Mom never kissed anymore. James hesitated, struggling to find the right words. Finally, he said, "Sometimes grown-ups show love in different ways." It wasn't a perfect answer, but it was the only one he could give, one that tried to shield his children from the deeper truth of their fractured family. James wasn't sure if Becky truly believed him, but after what felt like an eternity, the day finally arrived. Emma, their youngest, was heading off to college. As they helped her settle into her dorm room, James felt a whirlwind of emotions. Pride for his daughter, sadness at this new chapter in his life coming to a close, but also a sense of relief. He had kept his promise to stay for the kids, and now it was time to focus on himself. That evening, after returning home from dropping Emma off, James sat down with Becky at the kitchen table, the same one where they had shared countless family dinners over the years. The house felt eerily quiet without the sounds of the children. "I'm leaving," James said, his voice calm but resolute. "I stayed all these years for the kids, but I can't do it anymore." Becky's face crumpled as tears welled up in her eyes. "Please, James," she begged, her voice trembling. "We can start over now that the kids are gone. We can focus on us. We can fall in love again." James shook his head slowly, his sadness evident. "I'm sorry, Becky, but I don't think I can ever trust you again. And without trust, there can't be love," Becky cried, pleading with him. But James had already made up his mind. The next day, he packed his things and moved out. It was hard, far harder than James had ever imagined, but he knew it was the right thing to do. The kids were devastated when they found out, unable to grasp why their parents were splitting up now after so many years. James sat them down and tried to explain as best he could. He told them he loved them deeply and that he had stayed all those years because he wanted to be there for them. He assured them that, even though he and their mom weren't together anymore, they would always be a family. Over time, the kids began to understand. They saw that their dad was happier now, that he smiled more and seemed more at ease. They still spent plenty of time with him, and their bond grew even stronger. James was there for every important moment. Lily's law school graduation, Jack's wedding, Emma's first art show. He became a constant presence in their lives, a rock they could always rely on. James learned that being alone didn't mean being lonely. He had his kids, his friends, and his work. He started to do things he enjoyed but had long given up. He picked up painting again, finding solace in the sweep of a brush across the canvas. He joined a hiking club, rediscovering his love for nature and adventure. For the first time in years, he felt truly happy. Becky, on the other hand, struggled more with the divorce. She had thought that James's presence in their marriage meant they could work through anything, that staying together was a testament to their love. The reality of the separation hit her hard, and she found it difficult to let go of the past. She tried to stay active and busy, attending events and social gatherings, but the loneliness and regret lingered. It wasn't just the end of their relationship. It was the loss of a shared life and all the dreams she had built with James. Despite her efforts to move forward, she often found herself wishing things could have turned out differently. James would stay forever, even though things weren't good between them. Becky realized too late how much she had hurt him and how much she had lost because of her mistake. She went to therapy, trying to understand why she had risked everything for a brief affair. It was a long, painful process, but slowly, she began to heal. The journey was difficult, filled with moments of self-reflection and regret. But over the years, Becky grew into a better version of herself, learning to accept her flaws and mistakes. As time passed, James's children grew up and had families of their own. He became a wonderful grandfather, always there for his grandkids with a smile, a hug, and a funny story. His children, despite the pain of the past, respected and loved him deeply for the sacrifice he had made by staying in an unhappy marriage for their sake. They saw in him an example of true strength, resilience, and love. To them, his actions spoke louder than words, showing the depth of his commitment to family. One day, as James sat on his porch with his oldest son, Jack, watching his grandkids play in the yard, Jack asked him a question that had been on his mind for years. "Dad, do you regret staying with Mom all those years?" James paused for a moment, looking out at the children laughing and playing, then shook his head. "No," he said, a small smile on his face. "It was hard. Probably the hardest thing I've ever done. But I gotta see you kids every day. I gotta be there for all the important moments in your lives. That was worth everything to me." As James looked at his son, now a grown man with kids of his own, he realized that the decision he had made, even in the face of heartbreak and sacrifice, had given him the chance to be there for his children when they needed him most. And that, in the end, was more valuable than anything else. James felt a deep sense of pride as he reflected on everything he had endured. He had made it through the hardest period of his life and kept the promise he made to his children. Though his marriage had ended, he had found happiness again. James understood that life didn't always offer the perfect endings like in the movies. Sometimes, mistakes were made that couldn't be undone, and sometimes love wasn't enough to keep two people together. But he also knew that even in the most difficult times, there could be moments of joy and love. He had found those moments with his children and grandchildren, and that was enough for him. As he hugged his son goodbye and watched him leave with his own family, James felt a sense of peace. He had learned that true strength wasn't about avoiding hurt. It was about rising after being knocked down and doing the right thing, even when it was the hardest choice. In the end, that was exactly what he had done. James went back inside his house, closing the door on the setting sun. He picked up a framed photo of his kids and grandkids, smiling at their happy faces. He might not have gotten the fairy tale ending he once dreamed of, but he had something just as valuable, a life filled with love, respect, and the comfort of knowing he had always done his best for the people who mattered most. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
I usually don't ask this early, but if you could like the video and subscribe, it would mean a lot. We're so close to hitting 1,000 subscribers, and your support can really help get my content out there. Thanks. Marc Delacroix walked through the tree-lined streets of Paris, his mind wandering back to the life he had built with his wife, Camille. After 35 years of marriage, they were preparing for a grand celebration of their love. Their children, Claire and Mathieu, now grown and living abroad, were coming home for the occasion. The thought filled Marc with pride and nostalgia. Life hadn't always been easy, but he believed they had endured everything together. Marc was 60, still tall and commanding with his salt-and-pepper hair and sharp blue eyes. He had spent his life as a lawyer, building a respectable career that earned him both wealth and admiration. His name carried weight in Paris's legal circles, and he had provided well for his family. Camille, now 58, had been a school teacher for most of her life before retiring a few years earlier. She had always been his anchor, the warm, nurturing presence that balanced his driven, sometimes distant personality. Their home was in the heart of Paris, an elegant apartment overlooking the Seine. It was filled with memories, photos of vacations to the French Riviera, family gatherings, and mementos of a life they had carefully constructed together. The upcoming celebration would be another beautiful memory to add to their collection, or so Marc believed. As the evening of their anniversary approached, Marc decided to prepare a surprise for Camille. He wanted to relive the moments of their early love, so he ventured into their attic to search for the old photo albums and keepsakes from their early years. Camille was out running errands, and he thought this was the perfect time to reminisce. The attic was filled with boxes, mostly from their children's childhood and old family items. But one box caught his attention. It was tucked away in the corner, a small wooden chest that he didn't recall seeing before. Curious, he opened it. Inside were letters, yellowed with age, tied neatly with a ribbon. The handwriting was unmistakable, but it wasn't his. The letters were addressed to Camille. Mark's heart raced as he slowly began to read them. The words on the page revealed a secret he was never supposed to know. The letters were from Laurent, a man who had been a close friend of the family for years. Mark remembered Laurent well, tall, charming, a banker with a silver tongue who had often joined them for dinners and gatherings. He had always been courteous and respectful, but now, reading these letters, Mark realized there had been something more. The letters spanned several years, dating back to a time when Mark had been consumed with work, spending long hours at the office, traveling for business, and often leaving Camille alone at home. Laurent's words were filled with passion, longing, and intimacy, describing secret meetings, stolen kisses, and moments Mark had never imagined. It was clear that they had been having an affair. Mark felt his chest tighten as he read the lines. Every loving word between Camille and Laurent was a dagger to his heart. Laurent had written about the guilt they both felt, the fear of being caught, and the excitement of their hidden romance. Mark's mind swirled with confusion. How could Camille, the woman he had shared his life with, betray him in such a way? His hands shook as he dropped the letters back into the chest. For a moment, he stood there in the dim light of the attic, the weight of 35 years of trust and love crumbling around him. Everything he thought he knew about his marriage now seemed like a lie. He wanted to confront her, to demand answers, but a part of him didn't even know where to begin. Mark stumbled down the stairs, his thoughts racing. He couldn't believe this had been going on under his nose. How had he missed it? Was he really so blind to what had been happening in his own home? That evening, Camille returned, smiling as she walked through the door, her arms filled with groceries for the party. She kissed Mark on the cheek as she always did, unaware of the storm brewing inside him. He couldn't bring himself to look at her. Every touch felt like a betrayal. He excused himself, claiming he was feeling unwell. He needed time to process this, time to think about what to do next. Over the next few days, Mark lived in silence. He couldn't bear to confront Camille yet, and he couldn't confide in anyone, not even his children. He felt trapped in his own emotions, struggling to understand how to deal with this new reality. His mind replayed moments from their past, times when Camille had been distant, when she had seemed distracted. He wondered how many of those moments were connected to Laurent. Camille, oblivious to Mark's internal turmoil, continued planning their anniversary celebration with excitement. She spoke of renewing their vows, of how much she loved him after all these years. Mark listened in silence, his heart breaking with every word she said. One night, unable to sleep, Mark found himself staring out the window at the city lights of Paris. The memory of their wedding day played in his mind, a day filled with joy, hope, and promises. He had believed they would grow old together, but now he wasn't sure if that future existed. Finally, after days of torment, Mark knew he had to confront her. He couldn't live with the lie any longer. The night before their anniversary, Mark sat Camille down in their living room. His face was pale, his hands trembling as he brought the box of letters with him. Camille looked confused at first, but as he opened the chest and pulled out the letters, her expression changed. Her eyes widened in shock, then in shame. "Mark, please, let me explain," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Explain what?" Mark's voice was cold, filled with pain. "Explain how you could betray me like this? How long, Camille? How long were you with him?" Tears welled in Camille's eyes. She reached out to touch his hand, but he pulled away, unable to bear her touch. "It was years ago, Mark," she said softly, "when you were working all the time, when you were never home. I was lonely. I didn't know how to talk to you about it. Laurent, he was there. He made me feel seen. But it's over, Mark. It ended a long time ago." "Over?" Mark spat the word. "You expect me to believe that?" You expect me to forget that you lied to me for years? Camille's tears flowed freely now. I never meant to hurt you. I was weak, and I made a terrible mistake. But I love you, Mark. I've always loved you. Please, you have to believe that. Mark stood up, pacing the room as he tried to make sense of her words. The anger and hurt inside him boiled over. How can you say you love me after everything you've done? You shattered everything we built. For a long time, they stood there in silence. Camille wept, and Mark stared at the woman he thought he knew, now feeling like a stranger to her. The pain was too much to bear. I need time, Mark finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. I can't do this right now. He left the room, leaving Camille sobbing on the couch. That night, he packed a bag and drove to their summer home in Provence. He needed to be alone, away from the city, away from the life that now felt like a lie. Chapter 5. The Retreat. In Provence, the air was crisp and the landscape serene, but Mark found no peace. He spent his days wandering through the fields and vineyards, trying to come to terms with what he had discovered. Every memory of his life with Camille was now tainted by betrayal. At night he would lie awake, his mind filled with questions. How could she have done this? Was it his fault? Had he been too focused on his career, too absent in their marriage? The more he thought about it, the more he realized that their marriage had not been perfect. There had been times when they had grown distant, when work had consumed him, and Camille had seemed lonely. But still, he had never imagined she would turn to someone else. A week passed, and Mark received messages from Camille every day. She begged for forgiveness, pleaded with him to come home. She told him she loved him, that she regretted everything, but Mark couldn't bring himself to reply. One evening, sitting on the porch of their summer home, Mark made a decision. He needed to speak to someone who could help him make sense of his emotions. He reached out to a therapist in the nearby village and scheduled an appointment. Mark's therapy sessions were difficult but necessary. For the first time, he was able to talk openly about his feelings of betrayal, anger, and confusion. The therapist helped him see that while Camille's actions had been wrong, the cracks in their marriage had been there for years. Mark had been distant, consumed by his work, and Camille had felt neglected. It didn't excuse her infidelity, but it helped Mark understand why it had happened. Over time, Mark began to heal. He realized that holding on to his anger would only continue to hurt him. He had a choice to make, whether to try to rebuild his marriage or to walk away and start anew. After several weeks, Mark returned to Paris. He wasn't sure what the future held, but he knew he needed to talk to Camille face to face. When Mark walked through the door of their apartment, Camille was waiting for him. She looked tired, her eyes red from crying. She stood up as he entered, but she didn't approach him. They stood there for a moment, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between them. "Mark," she began, her voice trembling. "I'm so sorry. I don't know how to make this right, but I need you to know that I love you. I've always loved you." Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I believe you, Camille, but I don't know if love is enough anymore. You broke something inside me, inside us." Tears welled in her eyes again, but she nodded. "I understand." They talked for hours that night, sharing their pain, their regrets, and their hopes for the future. In the end, Mark made the hardest decision of his life. He couldn't stay in the marriage. The betrayal had cut too deep, and he didn't believe they could ever truly heal. But he didn't leave with anger. Instead, he thanked Camille for the years they had shared, for the love they had once had, and for their children. They parted on peaceful terms, with an understanding that sometimes love, no matter how strong, isn't enough to overcome the damage that's been done. Mark moved to a smaller apartment in the city, focusing on rebuilding his life. He continued therapy, working through the pain of the past, and slowly, he began to find peace. He realized that while Camille had betrayed him, he could still find happiness in the years ahead. As for Camille, she stayed in their home, carrying the weight of her actions, but also finding a way to move forward. They remained in contact for the sake of their children, and over time, their relationship became one of mutual respect, if not love. Thank you for watching Shattered Vows, a tale of betrayal and redemption. This story reminds us that trust is the foundation of any relationship, and once broken, it's hard to rebuild. But in the end, it's about finding the strength within to move forward, no matter how painful the journey may be. If you enjoyed the story or have any thoughts, questions, or personal experiences you'd like to share, we'd love to hear them in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this.